280 участников из Казахстана, Азербайджана, Беларуси, Индии, Кыргызстана, Литвы, Польши, России и Украины. Среди вас ректора, проректора, профессура и студенты ведущих казахстанских высших учебных заведений. Хотелось бы отметить, что значительно расширилась география спикеров форума, которые имеют богатый теоретический и практический опыт в области
experience in internal quality assurance system. And we have formulated the...
Чтобы перед вами выступили представители лучших зарубежных университетов и аккредитационных агентств из Австрии, Германии, Соединенного Королевства, Литвы, Бельгии, Эстонии, Азербайджана и Российской Федерации. Ректора и проректора, представители ведущих университетов Казахстана. IV Евразийский форум по обеспечению качества в образовании затронет многие актуальные вопросы в сфере внутренней системы обеспечения качества высших учебных заведений. В частности, это проблемы и особенности организации внутренней системы обеспечения качества, новые модели и концепции обеспечения качества, успешные практики и сложности, которые могут возникнуть. Но главная цель проведения Евразийского форума заключается в обмене опытом и знаниями между всеми участниками, который несет существенный вклад в улучшение внутренней системы обеспечения качества высших учебных заведений, создать стимулы для дальнейшей плодотворной работы. Желаю всем участникам форума плодотворной работы, конструктивного диалога и эффективного взаимодействия. Выражаю благодарность всем участникам форума и гостям, которые нашли время принять участие в Евразийском форуме. Особенно хотелось выразить благодарность председателю Комитета по обеспечению качества в сфере образования и науки Министерства образования Республики Казахстан, Гулзат Исбасаровне Кобеновой и члену Высшего совета по экономическим реформам при президенте Республики Казахстан, члену Высшей научно-технической комиссии при правительстве Республики Казахстан, председателю наблюдательного совета Независимого агентства по обеспечению качества, экс-министру образования, профессору Жаксыбеку Абдрахметовичу Кулекееву. Спасибо всем вам большое, что нашли время для участия в форуме. Слово для приветствия представляется председателю Комитета по обеспечению качества в сфере образования и науки Министерства образования Республики Казахстан Гулзат Исбасаровне Кобеновой. Пожалуйста, Гулзат Исбасаровна.
Спасибо, Муртазовна. Құрметті форумға қатысушылар, құрметті қонақтар, сіздерді білім сапасын қамтамасыз етуге арналған Еуропалық 4-ші форумда қарсы алғаныма қуаныштымын. Тәуелсіздігіміздің 30 жылдығының қарсаңында білім сапасын арттыруға қатысты форумның өтуінің маңызы өте зор. Добрый день, уважаемые участники форума, уважаемые гости. Рада приветствовать вас на 4-м Евразийском форуме, посвященном вопросам обеспечения качества высшего образования. Казахстан, как полноправный член Европейского пространства высшего образования, уделяет особое внимание завершению реализации ключевых обязательств, в том числе обеспечению качества в соответствии со стандартами и руководящими принципами обеспечения качества на европейском пространстве высшего образования. Это подтвердили и министры, ответственные за высшее образование, приняв последнее римское коммюнике. В коммюнике отмечено, что наше общество столкнулось с беспрецедентными вызовами, связанными с глобальным распространением COVID-19 и его последствиями. Поэтому страны взяли на себя обязательство повышать качество образования в полной мере, используя новые возможности, предоставляемые цифровизацией. Однако стоит отметить, что еще до пандемии, на протяжении последних 20 лет, основная миссия Болонского процесса и основная цель структурных реформ заключалась в обеспечении и повышении качества высшего образования. Сегодня общество остро нуждается в качественном образовании, а предоставление качественного образования – ответственность вузов перед обществом. В Казахстане же ориентиры были взяты на академическую свободу и честность, на участие студентов и персонала в управлении высшим образованием. Соответственно, казахстанская модель обеспечения качества высшего образования полностью основана на стандартах ESG и включает в себя 3 ее составляющих компонента: система внутреннего обеспечения качества, система внешнего обеспечения качества, управление и регуляторных механизмов системы обеспечения качества. В настоящее время создание системы внутреннего обеспечения качества является необходимостью для высших учебных заведений согласно действующим нормативным правовым актам. И каждый вуз должен иметь самостоятельно разработанную политику и стандарты внутреннего обеспечения качества, и их необходимо гармонизировать с действующим законодательством национальным, регламентирующим сферу высшего образования. Независимость внешнего обеспечения качества обуславливается тем, что она проводится независимыми аккредитационными агентствами по критериям и стандартам, разработанным ими самостоятельно. И при этом важно, чтобы стандарты и руководство для внешнего обеспечения качества не только отражали ESG, но и отражали приоритетные задачи, стоящие перед казахстанской системой высшего образования. В настоящее время в реестр уполномоченного органа входят 11 аккредитационных органов, в том числе 6 казахстанских и 5 зарубежных, и все эти агентства входят в различные ассоциации, сети, реестры, ведут свою работу в соответствии с признанными правилами, привлекают к своей работе отечественных и зарубежных экспертов. Значительно усилена ответственность аккредитационных органов за принимаемые решения. Нормативно закреплено требование об аккредитации вузов и образовательных программ при приеме на обучение, при размещении государственного образовательного заказа, для работы диссертационных советов, для выдачи дипломов об окончании высшего учебного заведения и так далее. Тем самым аккредитационные органы гарантируют заинтересованным сторонам наличие у организации образования политики и процессов, позволяющих взять на себя ответственность за качество образования. Уважаемые гости, разрешите выразить благодарность независимому агентству по обеспечению качества в образовании и лично Шолпан Муртазовне за организацию столь значимого для системы высшего образования уже 4-го Евразийского форума. И сегодня тема этого форума очень актуальна, посвященная вопросам внутренней системы обеспечения качества высших учебных заведений в новых условиях, и особенно важно развитие культуры качества в вузах. И в целом разрешите выразить благодарность за вклад в развитие Института аккредитации в Казахстане. Уверена, что 4-й Евразийский форум позволит продуктивно обменяться мнениями, обсудить важные вопросы качества образования, определить действенные пути дальнейшего развития и повышения конкурентоспособности. Желаю гостям и участникам форума полезных дискуссий, интересных выступлений, креативных решений. Благодарю.
Спасибо большое, Гулзат Исбасаровна. Приветственное слово предоставляется Жаксыбеку Абдрахметовичу Кулекееву. Пожалуйста, Жаксыбек Абдрахметович.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники и гости 4-го Евразийского форума. Рад приветствовать вас на 4-м ежегодном Евразийском форуме, организованном независимым агентством по обеспечению качества в образовании. Тематика форума по обеспечению качества в высшем образовании на тему «Внутренняя система обеспечения качества высших учебных заведений в меняющемся мире» является актуальной. Это связано с тем, что последние 2 десятилетия различные движущие силы превратили внутреннюю систему обеспечения качества в глобальную тенденцию реформирования высшего образования. В некоторых странах Это был добровольный ответ на требования, вытекающие из внешнего обеспечения качества, которые проводятся в форме различных процессов аккредитации, аудита и оценки. В других странах внутренняя система обеспечения качества была внедрена в рамках национальной реформы высшего образования, которая сделала внутреннюю систему обеспечения качества обязательной для всех университетов или вузов. В настоящее время в Болонском процессе принимают участие 49 государств-членов, а в 2015 году министры стран Европейского пространства высшего образования официально утвердили стандарты и руководство ESG 2015, по которым работают все страны, включенные в Болонский процесс. Однако все страны работают по-разному, и как следствие разнообразного и неравномерного глобального развития системы внутреннего обеспечения качества существуют большие различия с точки зрения стадий и функционирования, с которыми участники форума смогут познакомиться и задать свои вопросы. Например, в Казахстане Комитет по обеспечению качества в сфере образования и науки, Министерство образования и науки Республики Казахстан и аккредитационное агентство требуют от вузов внедрения внутренней системы обеспечения качества. В соседних странах это может быть по-другому. Для оценки современного состояния, а также влияния внешних и внутренних факторов на качество образования в 2017 году Международный институт планирования образования ЮНЕСКО и Международная ассоциация университетов совместно провели комплексные количественные и качественные международные исследования по оценке влияния на качество подготовки выпускников различных факторов. Эти вопросы были заданы ответственным за внутреннее обеспечение качества вузов, то есть проректорам по академическим вопросам и менеджерам вуза по качеству. В общей сложности было охвачено 311 высших учебных заведений из 97 стран мира. Не буду останавливаться на всем исследовании. Оно представлено в книге, опубликованной ЮНЕСКО в 2017 году «Внутреннее обеспечение качества, повышение качества высшего образования и трудоустройства выпускников». Однако хотел бы остановиться на двух графиках, полученных в результате анкетирования представителей вузов. Она показана на слайде 1. На слайде 2 показано, что наиболее главными целями по внутренней системе обеспечения качества является улучшение академической деятельности вуза, преподавание и обучение студентов 94%, оценка эффективности работы вузов 92%, соблюдение внешних стандартов, по которым проводится аккредитация вузов 90%. За ними следует подотчетность правительству и обществу 89%, институциональное обучение ППС и сотрудников 87%, совершенствование менеджмента 88% и справедливое распределение ресурсов 75%. Учитывая, что большинство учебных заведений рассматривали каждую из целей как основу своей системы внутренней оценки качества, то было очевидно, что ИКВА по-прежнему определяется как совершенствованием, так и соблюдением набора требований. Деятельность по внутреннему обеспечению качества может быть сосредоточена на различных функциональных областях вузов. Эти области могут включать преподавание и обучение, возможность трудоустройства выпускников, управление и управление, научные исследования, работу с общественностью, получение дохода и общественные услуги, а также международное сотрудничество. Для изучения направленности деятельности внутренней оценки качества учреждениям было предложено указать направленность их деятельности в области внутренней оценки. Как показано на слайде 3, преподавание и обучение 96% оставались основным направлением внутренней оценки для ответивших учреждений. За преподаванием обучением последовали вопросы управления и менеджмента вуза 74%, научных исследований 73%, трудоустройства выпускников 72%, международного сотрудничества 67%. Деятельность по информированию общественности и получению дохода была значительно менее популярной. Таким образом, между высшими учебными заведениями существовала четкая иерархия с точки зрения определения направленности их внутренней оценки. При этом преподавание и обучение, что неудивительно, были наиболее основными. По нашему мнению, внутреннее обеспечение качества в высшем образовании стало одним из важнейших способов мониторинга и управления качеством на институциональном уровне, тогда как внутреннее обеспечение качества с учетом пересмотра учебных программ может способствовать повышению и интеграции возможностей трудоустройства выпускников страны. Это особенно актуально в контексте быстрого глобального расширения и диверсификации экономики страны. В связи с пандемией система высшего образования столкнулись с новой реальностью, а у вуза появились новые задачи и требования для обеспечения должного уровня качества образования выпускников. Это особенно актуально, поскольку быстрое расширение охвата высшим образованием во всем мире привело к росту безработицы среди выпускников. Поэтому сегодня на высшее учебное заведение оказывается большое давление с тем, что они лучше согласовывали свои образовательные программы с реалиями и потребностями рынка труда. Одновременно необходимо адаптировать внутреннюю систему обеспечения качества под реалии нового поколения с участием различных заинтересованных стейкхолдеров, осваивая эффективные формы сотрудничества, взаимодействия и обмена опытом. Адаптация к новым реальностям сферы образования требует не просто изменений нашей текущей деятельности, но и разработки новых организационных и функциональных структур, внутренних норм, показателей и процессов, необходимых для постоянного повышения качества образования и развития культуры и качества высших учебных заведений. Необходимо развивать культуру и качество высших вузах среди руководителей вузов, администраторов, профессорско-преподавательского состава, студентов и стейкхолдеров путем обсуждений и разработки эффективной внутренней системы обеспечения качества высшего образования. В данном контексте Евразийский форум является эффективной платформой для обсуждения значимых вопросов в сфере внутреннего обеспечения качества высшего образования. В ходе сегодняшнего мероприятия будут обсуждаться наиболее острые вопросы, с которыми столкнулись представители в области образования. В поиске ответов на вызовы важен опыт коллег из других стран. Полагаю, что форум предоставит широкую площадку для обмена мнениями и знаниями по многим актуальным вопросам и проблемам в обеспечении внутренней системы качества высшего образования. Во-первых, мы рассмотрим успешные зарубежные практики внутренней системы обеспечения качества в таких странах, как Австрия, Испания, Германия, Литва, Россия, Соединенное Королевство, Эстония, Бельгия и другие страны. Ведущими зарубежными спикерами первой и третьей сессии будут охвачены такие вопросы, как современные модели обеспечения качества, конфликтующие функции систем внутреннего обеспечения качества, новые идеи, тенденции, подходы к повышению качества при подготовке кадров для индустрии, академическая честность и микроквалификации, внутренняя оценка учебных программ и рассмотрение ВОК в качестве инструмента для инноваций. Во-вторых, хотя обеспечение качества само по себе не является новым явлением, вопрос внутренней системы обеспечения качества высших учебных заведений как в регионе, так и в целом стране остается актуальным. Особенно повышение конкурентоспособности образовательных услуг и повышение внутренней системы качества вузов является приоритетным в эпоху цифровизации. В этой связи во второй и третьей частях форума будет представлена практика стран СНГ, в том числе казахстанской, российской и азербайджанской системы внутреннего обеспечения качества и их адаптация к современным реалиям, продиктованным текущей ситуацией в мире. Ведущими национальными региональными учеными будут охвачены такие вопросы, как обеспечение и улучшение академического качества, обеспечение качества организации образовательного процесса, партнерство вузов с индустрией в целях улучшения академических программ, актуализация понимания обеспечения качества и меры по поддержанию качества образовательных услуг. Я убежден, что итогом сегодняшней нашей с вами работы станут продуктивные дискуссии, новые контакты для будущих совместных проектов, конструктивные предложения, новые идеи, которые позволят поднять внутреннюю систему обеспечения качества высшего образования на новый уровень и помогут всем участникам форума произвести обмен инновационным опытом. Выражаю благодарность всем участникам конференции и гостям, которые нашли время, чтобы принять участие в форуме. Сегодня, как никогда, важно поддерживать друг друга и стремиться к продуктивному сотрудничеству на благо развития системы высшего образования и общества в целом. Желаю всем участникам IV Евразийского форума креативного диалога, успешной и плодотворной работы. Спасибо за внимание.
Большое спасибо, Жаксыбек Абдрахметович, за то, что вы нашли время выступить с приветствием. Спасибо огромное. А мы теперь переходим непосредственно к первой части нашего форума. Ну, позвольте начать нашу первую сессию, состоящую из двух частей. Сегодня на нашей площадке выступят в первой половине представители Австрии и Испании. Первый спикер Австрии представляет очень интересную презентацию. Она является ключевой. Но вначале я хотела бы рассказать немного о докторе Оливере Веттори. Он является деканом по аккредитации и управлению качеством, а также директором департамента программ управления и поддержки преподавания и обучения в Венском университете экономики и бизнеса. Он отвечает за международную аккредитацию, отвечает за менеджмент образовательных программ, за менеджмент центральной политики университета, процессов преподавания и обучения в университете. Кроме основной работы, которую он выполняет, он работает экспертом в области обеспечения качества высшего образования более 10 лет и более чем в 50 различных странах, поскольку работает в различных проектах Европейской ассоциации университетов, Европейской ассоциации по обеспечению качества, Европейского союза студентов, ЮНЕСКО и других организациях, в различных международных агентствах высшего образования. Оливер Веттори преподавал дисциплины по государственному управлению, организационному поведению и теории оценки. В качестве научного сотрудника Института организационных исследований он является автором десятков публикаций в области теории организации и организационной культуры. Доктор Оливер Веттори принимал участие в различных европейских проектах, например, в Erasmus+,
various economic projects, and such as Erasmus and Horizon 2020, and as of now, he is coordinating
в Engage. Кроме этого, он был одним из организаторов Европейского форума по обеспечению качества в 2018 году в Венском университете экономики и бизнеса. Если потом время хватит, я, конечно, хотела бы показать некоторые слайды этого университета, поскольку этот университет произвел очень сильное впечатление по архитектуре, по организации работы в этом университете. Но сейчас я хочу слово предоставить доктору Оливеру Веттори. Спасибо большое.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Шолпан. Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Добрый день всем. И для меня это особая честь быть здесь. Я очень рад, что самое главное, что у нас было такое введение. И в следующий раз я отправлю буквально 2 сообщения о своей биографии, потому что это очень было такое длинное вступление, потому что мне показалось, что вступление было дольше, чем моя презентация. Большое спасибо за мое приглашение на 4-й форум. И для меня я думаю, это хорошее достижение. Я вижу, как этот форум развивается, я вижу, как этот форум выходит на новый уровень, и для меня это особая честь быть здесь. И как вы видите, часть кампуса моего университета – это отражено в моем виртуальном фоне, и я бы очень обрадовался бы, если бы вы могли бы посетить физически мой университет в Вене, как только мы снова сможем путешествовать. Позвольте мне поделиться моим экраном, потому что, я думаю, нет смысла смотреть на меня. И да, дело в том, что я не могу поделиться экраном, потому что мне нужно соответствующее разрешение от организатора этой встречи. Может быть, кто является организатором, кто является создателем этой встречи. Да, к сожалению, у меня сейчас нет возможности поделиться экраном. Я думаю, кто-то закрыл.
Now it works. Perfect.
Да, теперь это работает. Спасибо. Спасибо большое. Да, все это работает. Отлично. Так, поделиться полностью экраном. Отлично. Итак, заголовок нашей презентации, и, возможно, это для вас какой-то будет сюрприз. И когда меня информировали о целях и вообще о целях внутреннего контроля качества, и учитывая те конференции, на которых я уже побывал в качестве спикера, что нового я могу привнести в свою презентацию. И я решил использовать вот эту картинку швейцарского ножа. И мы говорим много о улучшении внутреннего качества, мы много говорим о системах внутреннего контроля, но очень редко мы говорим о том, как предполагается, что эта система должна выполнять разные функции и с какими проблемами мы сталкиваемся. После этого я сфотографировал вот этот швейцарский армейский нож, чтобы все это продемонстрировать. И я думаю, вы с этим сталкивались. Я думаю, многие даже из вас являются пользователями вот этого устройства. Это очень полезная штука, особенно если мы куда-то выезжаем на кемпинг, на природу. Но я не такой квалифицированный путешественник, у меня не так много опыта в кемпинге. Я редко использую этот нож, но тем не менее, все знают, что это такое, и все мы понимаем, что это является одним из факторов успеха. Таким образом, у нас есть разные инструменты, которые сосредоточены и которые помещаются в наш карман. И это удивительно. И я подумал, что время меняется. Возможно, у нас есть какие-то даже новые, модернизированные версии вот этого швейцарского ножа. И, конечно, это больше выглядит как шутка, потому что у нас нет аккаунта Твиттера в нашем ноже. У нас есть, тем не менее, USB-разъемы, у нас есть такие зажигалки многофункциональные. И, может быть, вы задаетесь вопросом, как это связано с контролем качества, с внутренним контролем качества. Да, нам бы не хотелось, чтобы спикер говорил нам о ножах. Но я хотел бы показать, что система внутреннего контроля, то, как она построена, она не сильно отличается от ножа, который используется в швейцарском ноже. Потому что и во многих учреждениях, и мы проводили разного рода исследования и опросы, и у очень многих учреждений есть подобные инструменты. Вместо того, чтобы иметь нож и какие-то ножницы. У нас есть возможного рода опросы, внутренние оценки. У нас есть какие-то программы оценки и программы собственной оценки своей собственной деятельности и различного рода тренинги, различного рода документы, различного рода циклы, которые являются ключевым элементом. Но, тем не менее, эти инструменты, они выглядят очень знакомыми, они, казалось бы, очень хорошо известны, но это не означает, что у нас есть стандартизированные какие-то элементы. И мое основное умозаключение – это то, что когда мы говорим о системе внутреннего контроля,
serving all those different needs, having all those different tools that will then be able and help us to actually improve quality in our institutions. And this is where I would differ, in my opinion, because I do believe this is one of the most problematic assumptions we have on IQA. Why? Because again, the analogy, I hope it works for you as well, most of our IQA systems are not fit for all purposes, and they can't be, very much like the Swiss Army knife. So what is the problem with the Swiss Army knife? I've just taken 4 pictures here about different types of contexts, of environments, and immediately you will see, one of the problems with the Swiss Army knife is it has a lot of different tools, but it's not necessarily suitable for all contexts. Yeah. If your plane goes down in the sea, or you're in any other way lost at sea, what would you do with your Swiss Army knife? It's not going to help you while you have to keep swimming. It's most likely not going to help you when you're visiting the moon or something. Yeah? You would not even be allowed to bring it in your spacesuit. What would you do with your Swiss Army knife in the desert? Yeah, where you would be where you would use water or any kind of water storing system more than you would use scissors or something like that. And the same could be argued for sitting on a tree in a jungle. So of course, these are very exaggerated and obvious examples of contexts where the Swiss Army knife would not help you as much as in other contexts. But again, coming back to quality assurance, it's not that different, because we're also living in very different quality, very different higher education institutions. So our contexts and environments differ a lot. And for those of you who have been hearing me at other conferences, I've for a long time been arguing that we need to be careful. It's a good thing we learn from each other, but we need to be careful. We need customized IQA systems. Not every institution needs the same system as the other does. And this is also important very often as a message for external quality assurance. Don't try to standardize systems too much through your requirements, because it's not going to work. Why? We have those broad multidisciplinary universities, but we also have very specialized higher education institutions. Higher education institutions only focusing, for example, on business or arts, or maybe even a film school or whatever it would be. And of course, the Swiss Army knife of their internal quality assurance system needs to look differently. I've seen interesting systems at universities of arts, and the basic idea is similar to, but you have artists there, you have one-on-one training for people learning about instruments. This is different. Surveys don't even make sense there in many courses or classes, because you have too few students there. You have to tailor-make it to the needs there. We have these big differences between public universities and private universities. Public universities, very often they're funded by governments. And of course, that means political stakeholders, the public stakeholders, they have different requirements. This is something that we need to deal with. Private AGIs have to deal with those requirements as well.
Предъявляют различного рода требования этим вузам, но частные вузы, они должны заниматься также какой-то экономической деятельностью, чтобы удостовериться в том, что они зарабатывают деньги. И особенно если мы посмотрим с точки зрения экономической эффективности, какие-то системы не представляют одинаковой важности для частных и для государственных вузов. То есть
the bigger an institution, the more complex and the more differentiated your system will need to be. The smaller it is, the more you can work with basically one kind of quality. And of course, there's a big difference between more international or locally oriented AGIs. If you really want, if your context is you're among, I don't know, in the UK, among the top research universities, if you're aiming for a spot among the most top ranked universities on an international or even global, then your IQA system needs to look different. So this would be the first thing I wanted to show. We have this picture in mind, maybe not of a Swiss Army knife, but of an IQA system basically encompassing all those different tools and working in all those different contexts, because we're always talking about the system, but we're actually talking about very different contexts, and that means we need different quality assurance systems. And if I go to a second problem, and you might also take a look at these pictures again, it's not only that a Swiss Army knife will not work in all contexts, but it will also not work for all purposes. Unless your army knife has some kind of tools for picking a lock, you will not be able to open that lock you see on the upper left corner. Unless you have something to shortcut a car, you can't even start the engine of your car with the Swiss Army knife. So driving a car with it will not work. Cooking a pot of spaghetti, you need different tools for that. And if you take a look at the artist in the workshop down there, working with stone and with clay, again, no Swiss Army knife will really be able to help them. You need a sizzle, you need a hammer, you need different kind of tools there. And again, this sounds very trivial. But again and again, you will agree that when it comes to the army knife, that's totally clear, and no one would actually try to jumpstart the car with the help of this knife. When it comes to quality assurance, I see a lot of institutions acting as if their IQA system would be able to fulfill all purposes at once, achieving better ranking positions. But how would you achieve better ranking positions with course questionnaires or graduate surveys or whatever? You need the data for the ranking, but it's not going to help you achieve better positions. You need different tools for that. That might not be in your standard arsenal. Raise stakeholder satisfaction. That's very often an important goal. We want students to be happy. We want the government to be happy. We want employers to be happy. But for this, again, you need different tools than most have in their IQA system. Meeting accreditation standards, that's a nice one. But again, through the survey tools and all those things by themselves, that's not going to work. And the same thing is true for raising an organization's effectiveness and efficiency. I'll go in a bit more detail there in a minute, but the main point I wanted to raise as an issue at the start is we might want to rethink our notions of IQA systems as being able to fulfill all purposes, no matter the context, and work with highly standardized instruments and tools there. Now it's getting a bit theoretical, but only for a moment. I've been arguing in publications ages ago, basically, that part of the problems when it comes to IQA systems stems to two very different logics that I found, at least in the European higher education area. It's a bit different in the US, where the system is constructed differently, but this holds pretty much true for Europe. It holds pretty much true for Southeast Asia, where the system is built in the same way, and it holds pretty much true for Africa, as far as I see it. And the two different logics I see at the heart of all these misconceptions about IQA systems being able to fulfill all purposes at once is that we have, on the one hand, this quality management discourse. You might remember that quality management also in a corporate context, industry context, is not that old a concept. It arguably, in its current form, emerged very much in the 1980s, starting in sectors like the automobile industry, in Japan, in the US. This was the idea of managing the quality of your services, of your products. So this is basically a management discourse. That's where the whole discourse on quality management and later related to that quality assurance started. The roots there are in business concepts, are in business literature. You might be familiar with terms like total quality management. And this is still what we see in a lot of requirements or ideas on quality assurance systems for higher education as well. Being oriented at strategic goals, building an IQA system that helps you to fulfill your strategic goals. And the instruments that you find for that are goal agreements, performance agreements, key performance indicators, information systems, reporting, everything you need from a management point of view. The basic, arguably the basic mental concept behind it is this PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, act, starting from strategic goals and then bringing it down. Now, the interesting thing is, if we take that seriously, then our IQA systems would need to be built very differently. As I said, raising stakeholder satisfaction, making sure that the products are meeting the labor market requirements. Many companies don't do lots of surveys on that, or if they do, it's not just a satisfaction survey. They're long over that. You need different tools, you need different processes, and of course, you need process inside the institution. But, and on the right hand, on the right side of the slide, you will see that, but when it comes to higher education, we have a second logic at place. And that's what I'm calling the quality assurance logic, not the quality management logic. This is, instead of a management discourse, it's actually following the logic of a political discourse. The roots of quality assurance in higher education in Europe are, on the one hand, this quality management discourse that started in the 1980s and then kind of leapt over into higher education and other sectors, but it's also very much rooted in the Bologna process, in the Bologna Declaration. And the big difference here is this has nothing to do with effectiveness and efficiency and making your organization better. This has a lot to do with stakeholder satisfaction and making sure, and stakeholders are not clients. Yeah, so this is about different political constituencies, different stakeholders, ultimately agreeing what needs to be done in order to improve the quality. And that means the basic instruments, as I see there, these are the surveys and the course evaluations and the graduate surveys and the teaching development schemes, everything that is very much related to European standards and guidelines of quality assurance, the ESG. But, and I hope you can follow that to some degree or might even agree with me, but this is a different logic. Now, the most difficult part from my point of view is that when it comes to external quality assurance, because we could well live with the different logics, but when it comes to external quality assurance, those two logics are always mixed. I have, in all my work on an international level, I have never seen any external quality assurance criteria where I did not have, on the one hand, criteria oriented at the management logic, looking for KPI, looking for a policy or clear goals or a strategy where things are following it. And on the other hand, oriented at the more political side of things on the stakeholder expectations. And that's very difficult for higher education institutions to deal with the related tensions. But that was the most abstract part I wanted to share with you. At the roots of this, of course, we again find this almost philosophical question about what quality is. And I've always liked to use this picture of an empty canvas, because quality is not much more than an empty canvas. It needs to be filled with sense, it needs to be filled with meaning. You need to first clarify what it is. And if you take a look at different institutions and the different understandings of quality and how this frame could be filled, you see all these different ideas that you are familiar with yourselves. You've seen them in your own institutions, you've heard about that from literature. Quality as perfection, quality as excellence, striving for perfection, quality as fitness for purpose, quality as a customer satisfaction or stakeholder satisfaction, quality maybe even as a competitive advantage. Yeah, that's in a way a link to the whole ranking, to the ranking debate. quality as value for money, if students are paying fee or if the government is paying funds, quality as a goal to strive for, quality as transformation, quality as meeting criteria, as compliance. I'm not going through all of them, but these are very, very different notions of quality. And very often our discourse, also when it comes to building IQA systems or internal Swiss Army knives, we stop with that. We say, oh, it's complicated, very different stakeholder views. And then we stop with that. But this has very, very practical consequences for our IQA system. And I'm just showing you a few examples. If we focus on quality as stakeholder satisfaction and or value for money, then the focus of our IQA systems need to lie on stakeholder relationship management, making sure that the students or the alumni or the parents of potential students know about the values of our institution, that you maintain a dialogue with them, hear what their concerns are, work on that. For this, you need satisfaction surveys, or you need to monitor what they like, what they don't like. And the big focus is on improving the students' experience in your organization, student support services, student mentoring, everything you need that students actually are satisfied and feel they get their value, they get value for what they're paying. If you follow the idea of quality as more as meeting external requirements, for example, yeah, I'm not going into details there, the criteria also set by IQAA, then arguably the focus is more on management information systems. Then your IQA system needs to define or create effective and efficient self-assessment processes, documentation processes.
Систему оценки своей деятельности, систему самооценки и, соответственно, оптимизации соответствия определенным.
Your fit with the standards. You need those external accreditations and audit seals. You want them, so you basically create a system that helps you getting there. If the focus is on institutional effectiveness instead, meaning that you want to achieve your strategic goals, you want to improve your positioning, you want to improve your performance, then arguably the tools again are different. Key performance indicators, because you want to first define and then monitor the performance of your organization. Process management plays a big role because you need very clear-cut processes in your organization. Many higher education institutions are very bad about that. But managing processes is then a big part of your IQA efforts. And ultimately, the goal there is supporting the institution in achieving the strategic goals. Now, there's others that say, well, quality and quality assurance is ultimately about better teaching and learning experiences. And again, that's different. And again, it requires different tools. It requires different teaching, and it requires teaching and learning strategies and policies with clear actions to go there. It needs a focus on program design, on course design, didactic trainings, and ultimately there the goal is to support students and staff to develop their skills as teachers, as learners better, to help them with that. Now, these were just 4 examples. Yeah, if we go back there, almost from every of those frames, we could end up with a different focus, with a different emphasis, with different instruments for your IQA system. So the question that everyone, of course, then wants to ask, and that I've also been asked, is, can we have it all? And yes, I see how alluring that is and how many people in quality assurance, and especially in higher education and higher education policy making, always have this idea, we can do that all. It's all very important goals. And I agree. But where I would disagree is you can't achieve all the same goals with the exact same system and the exact same instruments. Now, of course, you could have different systems in parallel, or you can build a very complex system with loads of different instruments, but then you would need unlimited resources, and no one has unlimited resources. So again, there needs to be a focus. And even if you would resolve this problem, you would still have the problem that many of those goals I've shown you have tensions, they have conflicts in them. So within the traditional QA logic, that it's ultimately about meeting stakeholder requirements and it's very difficult to meet everything within the same system. So this is part of the big message. If we can have a great Swiss Army knife as an AQA system, but it still will not work in all the contexts, and it still will not work for all the purposes, no matter how much we would wish for it. We can compromise, we can make restrictions to it, but we can't actually outperform ourselves in every area at once. And there's slowly approaching the end of what I wanted to show you, and I'm happy to discuss anything. A big question then is, for me, and this is something that has been occupying my mind now for the last 2 years, how well are our AQA system then actually fitting with the current or with the future challenges, and arguably even the current challenges of our higher education institutions? If a lot of IQA is retrospective, documenting things, evaluating things, what do we do with the things that are lying ahead of us? What kind of IQA system would we need for that? We have an increasingly globalized societies. We have a globalized economy. Higher education, to a certain degree, is becoming more and more international and globalized. And this is a big challenge for our IQA systems. Different rule books, different rule works, different processes. How well are our IQA systems actually supporting internationalization? This one is even more important, I think, at the moment. I mean, climate change is one of the most threatening challenges mankind has ever had to face. How well are our IQA systems connected to sustainable development goals and all those aspects? There are some interesting examples globally or internationally. Some of you might know from the Swiss example, where the focus on sustainability is actually within the standards and criteria on external quality assurance within the Swiss system. But this is still very rare. There's a lot of people who rightfully could or would argue against it, but still, if this is the purpose of higher education, helping educate people who help us save the world, how well is quality assurance helping with that? Aging societies, different kinds of learning. This is one of my favorite pictures because it also shows to you that it's not always the young ones learning from the elder ones. Education is changing, learning is changing, because very often younger people now have skills that the older generations don't have, but the older generations have the experience. So how do we actually remodel our pedagogy and our didactics? And again, what role will IQA play with that? The same is true when it comes to this increasingly fragmented and specialized knowledge economy that we're all working in. I mean, basically no one is a universal genius anymore. You need to have different people working together across different disciplines. And we're all talking that much about interdisciplinary work. But interdisciplinary work's different from disciplinary work. Most quality assurance mechanisms are, especially in research, very much linked to the disciplinary cultures. So how are we going to deal with that in the future? And last but not least, digitalization. Yeah, and that's a big driver of change. That's a big opportunity, but also a big threat. The labor market is changing, our societies are changing. And again, what role does IQA play in there? And this also brings me to the question, very often when we talk about the IQA system, inside of our institutions, they seem to be linked to strategy, but on a very abstract way. But if our strategies are about digitalization, sustainability, internationalization, new types of learning, interdisciplinary, what role does IQA then play for them? And how could we build IQA systems that really support those strategic goals and don't just build PDCA cycles on paper? Now, ending with that, because of course it's also a very academic thing to show some things and then leave people with the open questions. Very briefly, I don't want to advertise anything we're doing at my institution. I just wanted to show you, when we talk about IQA at my institution, it has always been important for me that the focus is not on the service and the instruments and the processes as such, but that we actually really think and rethink what is it that our organization needs in order to work. And I wanted to share two examples with you. One big focus, this is, by the way, again, a picture of part of our university campus. One big focus of our own IQA system is we put a lot of emphasis on communication architectures. What do I mean by communication architecture? We're living in higher education institutions, and arguably all what the experts can do or do, they need to have a dialogue on that. They need to communicate on that. You need communication among your experts, between the experts and the administration, between the experts and the outside world, between the teachers and the students, among students. Higher education in many ways is built on communication. So in order to make that work better, we've also tried to design our own elements of communication architecture, really designing communication opportunities as part of our QA system, building bridges between the different stakeholder groups, making sure that they understand each other better, that they speak the same language. It's very often a translator function. Building stages, because money for many researchers and teachers is not the important thing, but reputation is. So how do you make sure that they get the reputation for what they're doing and not the institution? One of the things about rankings very often is it's the higher education management and the higher education institution that gets all the rewards and the applause for it. But it's the teachers and the researcher doing the work for achieving these ranking positions. How do you make sure through your communication architecture that they also get the rewards they deserve for achieving this? How do you create formal opportunities for regular exchange? And I'm not just talking about a report that you upload in the internet, but that you make sure that people discuss results, that they discuss a way forward. At my institution, we've been investing a lot of time and effort into creating meeting architectures and creating ways of people to get together in a formal and informal way. And from my point of view, this is part of an IQA system if your focus is on that. And the second thing I wanted to share with you are some more recent things we've started, because the ever-changing world that we're living in, and also the changes that we have planned inside our institutions, this is a big, big challenge for my institution. And so quality assurance needs to play a role in how to mitigating those challenges and the effects of it. So parts of what we have included in our IQA system in order to support these roles are not so much navel gazing in terms of surveys and analysis of what is going inside the institution, but we are more and more focusing on environmental analysis to actually feed things that are happening outside of the institution to decision makers and helping them make sense of the environment in which we're living. And this is something very often a bit underrated in IQA. That it's not just about serving the people you already have in your organization, but very often also serving and monitoring the people not in your own organization, understanding what happens to them. And the same is with impact monitoring. We invest more and more time in our IQA system on trying to evaluate and monitor and the actual impact we're having on society. Because as many higher education institutions claim, they're important for societal benefits, they're important for economic development. And to what degree is that true? Where do we actually really see the impact of our graduates? Where do we really see the impact of our research? This is something that we're more and more focusing on, because if we can't even see that impact, or if we can't really evaluate it, then we might need to rethink our relevance in a way, and we might want to adjust our priorities and our processes. And when it comes to the intended change and managed change, more of our own IQA system focuses on project management standards, internal knowledge management. So miles away from the ideas of storing survey data, creating questionnaires, creating program reviews. We all have them, and they're all a functional part of our IQA system. But they're more there they're already part of the inventory. But when it now comes about bringing the institution forward, there's different focus points that we want to do. So ending for today, I was showing you the Swiss Army knife as my starting point for my thoughts. And then I was showing you this empty canvas in the middle of the presentation on this empty canvas related to the question, what is quality? So I wanted to end my presentation with making a proposal that maybe our IQA system should be less built like Swiss Army knife system, like a Swiss Army knife with different tools for those different purposes, but more like this kind of tools and colors for painting something on the canvas. This is also arguably a very big. This is also arguably tools, but they're more flexible than the ones in the Swiss Army knife, and you can mix it differently. You can create different pictures with it. So just again, in a more metaphorical way, leading you at the end of my presentation to the notion, maybe we focus too much on mechanisms and concrete tools and not so much about what is it we want to create at the end, what is it we need to create for the organization. And that means ultimately our IQA systems will need to be a bit more flexible and creative after all. And with this, I'm stopping for now. Very happy to hear any questions.
Большое спасибо, Оливер, за интересную презентацию. Я думаю, что многим она понравилась, особенно в плане того, что у вас такие несколько интересные сопоставления системы внутреннего обеспечения качества со швейцарским, значит, ножом или, значит, с красками. Это, в общем-то, действительно какие-то новые подходы интересные, и, я думаю, очень важные. Я хотела бы, если у наших сотрудников, вернее, участников пока нет вопросов, задать несколько вам вопросов. Вот эти исследования, которые вы проводите вот разного вида, каким образом вы, допустим, планируете их проводить, за счет каких средств вы проводите, как это, в общем-то, проводится в вашем университете?
Okay, Shobana, I just need to clarify. Do you mean the research my university does in general, or do you mean the research we're doing on quality assurance and higher education?
Исследования по обеспечению качества, потому что университет, конечно, ведет много разных исследований в зависимости от того, какие преподаватели работают, какие у них концентрации внимания, на каких объектах, а вот конкретно на системе обеспечения, внутреннего обеспечения качества. За счет каким образом вы планируете эту работу, как проводится?
Okay, so I think it's less about something that we plan, it's more like a state of mind. I've always been arguing that what different professional fields in higher education needs are reflected practitioners. So what we very often have in European universities is a clear divide between administration on the one hand and faculty, academic staff on the other hand. And in many institutions, the administration is responsible for quality assurance, and the academic staff is kind of related to it. They might be responsible, they're involved, but they're not always running it in detail. And I've often found that a problem. This is one of the bridges we need to gap. So what we do is big parts of my team, not only in quality assurance, but also in teaching and learning development and e-learning, I make it part of our culture and of the requirements for them that they constantly reflect. And research in our case is nothing more than a systematic reflection and evaluation if we're doing the right things and what is happening in the broader world to them, that they constantly reflect what they're doing. So we can't demand from the organization that it improves and changes and reflects in its if we don't do it for our own work. So sometimes we get project funding, but very often it's actually something that comes out from an everyday question where we want to make sure we're doing the right things. And so it's actually the staff within my department spending some of their time and very often also their spare time really doing the research on the things we're doing in order to make sure we stay on track.
Спасибо большое, Оливер, за ответ. И я думаю, ваш ответ, думаю, для многих казахстанских вузов будет тоже началом такой работы, что внутренняя система обеспечения качества, руководители этой системы, начиная с проекторов, тоже эту работу будут проводить не только в плане выполнения каких-то определенных критериев, а проводить аналитическую, исследовательскую работу для того, чтобы получать результаты, которые помогут им улучшать свою деятельность. Спасибо большое. Есть ли еще вопросы, уважаемые коллеги? Пожалуйста.
Можно вопрос?
Конечно.
Уважаемый Оливер, не могли бы вы хотя бы в общих чертах высказать ваше мнение о том, каково соотношение количественных и качественных критериев вот в оценке качества образования? Это первое. И второй вопрос. В каком направлении, по вашему мнению, будет эволюционировать в дальнейшем вот система оценки качества образования?
Well, it's two very big questions. Thank you very much. Very good question, very big question. There's a lot of debates on qualitative versus quantitative criteria. My first answer to them would be, it does not matter that much if they're qualitative or quantitative, but they should be smart and meaningful. So I've seen quantitative indicators that don't really make sense. You're just counting some random numbers and declare that as a quality indicator. That's not helping an institution. And I've seen very cleverly done quality indicators, quantitative ones. So just again, to give you an example, when we are now focusing on impact in my institution, you could say the output of your graduates, the number of your graduates is a quality indicator. But why should that be linked to quality? But the number of graduates from your institutions that are going to pursue a career in economics or in society or in politics, this might well be a quality indicator for how well you're educating them. So, and this of course makes more sense as a quantitative indicator, not just as an anecdote. Every institution can once have the great opportunity of educating a future prime minister or whatever. But it only becomes interesting if, I don't know, the majority of top politicians or top CEOs have been coming from your institution over a certain amount of time. So this for me works when it comes to quantitative indicators. Qualitative indicators for me is less about the indicators, it's more about understanding that you never can paint the full picture with quantitative indicators. You always have to dig deeper, and if you dig deeper and try to understand where something comes from, you can't do that with numbers alone. So this is more a question of methodology. I don't know if I answered that question in a satisfying way, but it is tricky. And as I said, it's more a question of how well you define the criterion and that you don't think you have the full picture of the world by having 10 quantitative indicators. I think that would be naive. And about the future of quality assurance systems, I think that's a really broad question. I can only say what I feel what future quality assurance systems will need to deal with. And this is again coming back to the challenges I've tried to outline. If we move more into digital education, most QA systems and criteria are still not able to deal with it. we still act as if digital education was the same as normal education, but digital. That's not true. And it's also not true for quality assurance mechanisms. If sustainable development goals, climate change, etc., become more important for our institutions, then our IQA systems need to be more able to take a look at it. But this again goes beyond surveys. I had a very interesting discussion a year ago with a Norwegian university where they were saying, well, you know, we have as part of our system, we have a research integrity council. And we take a look at if the research is being done in a way that is up to our morals and to our values. But what we don't do, and we should actually do, is taking a look at what kind of research we do. And as long as we still do a lot of research on opening up new oil fields or whatever it is, we are not doing that much of a service to the world. So I think this will be a big challenge, because it's about the question, what is higher education for? Do we work for the improvement of society? Do we work for Emma who's paying us? And a quality assurance system then needs to be built that is not hypocritical and we're just demonstrating we're doing our best, but that the system is really working in a way for us achieving our best. So these are just two examples. I do believe we should not get hung up with technical details. Is it an evaluation? Is it an audit? Is it an accreditation? What kind of criterion do we need for that? We need to ask a few of the bigger questions when it comes to quality assurance. How is that serving the institutions, and how are the institutions serving society?
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Большое спасибо, Оливер. Время наше истекло, и поэтому я перехожу к следующему спикеру. Огромное спасибо, Оливер.
Thank you.
Уважаемые участники форума, переходим по нашей программе к следующему спикеру. Тема доклада «Внутренняя система обеспечения качества привносит инновации в университет, некоторый испанский опыт». Спикер профессор Антонио Серрано Гонзалес. Профессор Антонио Серрано Гонзалес является директором Арагонского агентства по обеспечению качества и стратегическому прогнозированию в сфере высшего образования АКПОА. Это аккредитационное агентство, ну, можно сказать, мы где-то в одно время, значит, проходили первую аккредитацию, потом вторую аккредитацию и достаточно тесно общаемся. Он является членом правления и казначением Европейской ассоциации по обеспечению качества. Он является профессором права, являлся профессором права в Автономном университете Барселоны. Кроме этого, он работал в Институте европейской истории права Макса Планка во Франкфурте на Майне, приглашенным профессором Калифорнийского университета в Беркли. В Италии он работал в качестве профессора в двух университетах, Федерико II в Неаполе и в Риме, а также он работал в Парижском университете во Франции. Поэтому сейчас хочу слово предоставить Антонио Серрано Гонзалесу. Он хороший друг нашего агентства. Антонио, please.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning from Zaragoza, Spain. Thank you very much for your kind words, my dear friend, Dr. Kalarowa, Šolpan. In fact, the two agencies, no, we are like brothers in some way, no, and we cooperate very closely. I would like to thank very much the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and of course IQAA, the Independent Agency for Quality Assurance in Education, for the invitation. I am delighted. in participating in this fourth forum. Eurasian region is a very, very important one. And I think from the perspective of quality assurance has a strategic role, very important to play. Is making, I think, amazing and huge progress in developing quality assurance models and standards, internal and external. And then I am very happy to stay with you.
И я очень рад продолжать с вами работать. И сегодня у меня утро в Испании, у вас уже после обеда в Казахстане.
Share my screen. Okay. Okay. It's okay. You can see my screen, the presentation.
Хорошо видно, хорошо. Окей.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'm going to give you landscape of the Spanish scenario about quality assurance, internal and external. But as member of an agency, as member of the board of ENQA, I will adopt an external perspective that I think that is good because it's I can provide an additional external perspective to that showed by Oliver, no, in his beautiful presentation, no, before. Then I would say, if I have to go quick to explain what means the Spanish quality assurance system, I would say that it's a complex one. Especially by two reasons, because we have a multi-level, a complex legal system. Spain is a federal or almost a federal country, and the competences in higher education and the competences in quality assurance in higher education, no, are shared by the state and by the regions. But I would say most of these competences are in the hands of the regions. Secondly, because we have a plural system for quality assurance. We are 11 agencies in Spain. 8 of them are listed in the European Register ECAR and are full members of ENQA, and that's very important, as I will explain in a few minutes. Then it means that we have a quality assurance system in Spain from the external perspective where we cooperate among the Spanish agencies. We have a network called REACU, the Spanish Network for Quality Assurance. But at the same time, there is some kind of competition because there are reputation questions about the different regional agencies. There is a national agency called ANECA, but there is a distribution of competences. And we play in this scenario for quality assurance where are cooperation and competition between agencies. And at the same time, we are, as regional agencies, we are very close to the universities. We are close to the institutions. And we try to play an enhancement role and not only accreditation role. That I would say they are specific notes of the Spanish system. I will try to show you now an evolution and give you some examples in the direction of this innovation and this changing world that is coming, and we are facing so many challenges for us. But I advance my conclusion. I would say that internal quality assurance and external quality assurance work together. They must be implemented at the same time. And this is the spirit and the letter of the European standards and guidelines, the part 1 and the part 2 of the European standards and guidelines that we apply, the European agencies. And that I think is very, very important. There must be a timing.
И мы должны следовать определенным временным рамкам.
Korea there, no? There must be a swing, no? A good balance between internal and external.
Должен быть определенный эквилибриум между системами внешнего контроля и системами внутреннего контроля. И в Испании по прошествии 6 месяцев агентство занимается аккредитацией вузов.
These very, very important tasks of enhancement and helping to develop a strong and useful internal quality assurance system in our universities. As we are regional agencies, we know them well, these universities, and that's important. This double function to accredit and evaluate, and at the same time enhancement, and to help the universities. I think that in this changing world, after pandemic, on this post-pandemic time, this role that we have, there is always means attention, means also that we have as agencies this double function. As I said, we are goalkeeper of if the official rules are well applied by the universities, the number, for instance, the number of doctors in the academic staff, the number of students in each room, and so on. But at the same time, we must develop much more today this kind of accreditation of the quality of voluntary basis from the universities. So we are not only a control accreditation body, but we must be an agent for change, for innovation, and for enhancing higher education in our countries. Okay, and moment. I give up an example, and then I think that we can understand better the Spanish system. For instance, look at my agency, ACTUA, the Aragon agency. Aragon was a very important kingdom in Spain. Now it's a constitutional region. That's very important. How is defined an agency in Spain? In our case, we are founded by a regional law in 25, and it was very important because we are not only a control instrument, but as you can say, we are an instrument of the region of Aragon to promote quality improvement. That is the first function within the Aragon higher education system, favoring its relationship with industry, the employment market, and society as a whole. And we must
производили позитивный эффект на систему образования в целом и также на рынок занятости. И мы также стимулируем взаимоотношения с промышленностью, с рынком труда и обществом в целом. И то, как мы осуществляем эту деятельность, это очень важно. Но, так скажем, такие вот региональные рамки, это все является частью более больших юридических рамок. То, что вы видите слева, различного рода региональные законы, и в самом центре мы видим более такие законы, которые на федеральном уровне, и мы также должны учитывать все юридические нововведения. Таким образом, у нас есть достаточное количество инструментов, чтобы продвигать вот эту культуру поддержания качества. И что касается региональных законов, и у нас есть региональные законы региона Арагон, и согласно этим законам мы должны развивать систему и тем самым улучшать качество образования. Все это предполагает также дополнительные действия, которые также должны будут отражены в юридических рамках. И в центре у нас есть два таких столба, на которых все держится, и также очень важно понимать, что эти указы, они очень относительно свежие, потому что вот этот королевский указ, он не так давно вышел, и мы буквально 1 месяц исполнился этому королевскому указу. И также вот другие региональные законы, они были приняты буквально в июле, потому что этим летом у нас новые, так скажем, юридические рамки, которые были приняты в Испании. И в Испании вуз может получить аккредитацию на национальном уровне только если только если мы являемся частью списка, которые распространяются на весь Европейский Союз. То есть очень важно нам удовлетворять европейские нормы. И в Испании подобного рода 10 агентств аккредитации, но только 7 из этих агентств присутствуются в общеевропейском регистре агентств по аккредитации. И очень интересно видеть вообще эволюцию, потому что в Испании мы видим уже то, что все вот эти усилия, они дают определенные результаты. Сама идея качества образования в вузах – это не что-то, что навязывается, потому что мы являемся демократической страной, и Конституция наша была принята в 1983 году. И в Конституции говорится о том, что качество образования очень важно, но слово «качество» не было прописано в первой версии Конституции. И потом уже мы приняли новый закон о университетах в 1993 году, и также в 1983 году, и там уже первый раз упомянуто слово «качество», потому что, согласно закону, общество имеет право требовать качества высшего образования. И это уже очень важно, чтобы общество доверяло университетам. То, что общество может рассчитывать, то, что университеты, они качественные, то, что там люди чему-то новому научатся, то, что знания удовлетворяют определенным критериям. И также упоминалось, что университеты должны удовлетворять какой-то минимальную планкой согласно качеству. И
looking for is just at the beginning to guarantee a minimum standard of quality to the Spanish universities, and to that start by developing ex-ante evaluation of study programs. That means that before the implementation of a new okay. Before a study program is implemented by a university in Spain, must be evaluated, ex-ante evaluation, because for the ministry and for the Council of Universities, it's very important to know what kind of study programs are introduced and implemented and teach in our universities. And of course, a parallel research evaluation system start to be implemented. Then came this convergence with the higher education, European higher education area, and then the regions, as I showed, started to assume competences on quality assurance higher education, and arriving to the new century, the new university law in Spain, 21, developed the official accreditation activities. Study programs, academic staff, management activities should be evaluated or accredited. And then a map of quality agencies is configured in Spain, whose structures and functions will evolve over time to adapt to different developments in the European area. Then, at the same time, you need programs, evaluation programs. You don't need only legislation. You need evaluation programs, and that started in Spain with 2 national programs, Docentia and Audit. Look at the time, 27. The first was for evaluating teaching activity and teaching staff. It's a program shared by all Spanish agencies, which certify the design and implementation made by universities. And it's very important today because with the time, this program is serving for developing teaching staff strategies, promotion of academic staff, training of staff, and especially, that's very important, financial incentives for professors and teachers by national or by regional governments and universities. And this audit That is the first program for recognizing the internal quality assurance system designed and implemented by universities. These two programs are running today. They are old programs, but they are running today. But they didn't work as a coordinated programs. There was not, how can I say, a harmonic or organic view about evaluation and implementation of internal quality assurance systems inside universities. There was this program, Docentia, mostly for applying policies of financial incentives, a promotion and training of academic staff, and at the same time, coming from the, as Oliver showed in his presentation, coming from the private companies, from industry, this program for recognition, certification of the internal quality assurance system by the universities. And there was a very important step. There was this royal decree at the same year that say that all official study programs recognized in Spain must be evaluated by a Spanish quality assurance agency listed in the European register, INECAR. And that was our most important evaluation activity in Spain. Mandatory, because Docentia and audit are voluntary, but it's mandatory to accredit a study program, initial accreditation, a study program follow-up, and of course, a study program accreditation after 4 or 6 years. Then, the next step that means a very important progress was the arriving of the institutional accreditation, legally introduced in Spain, of course, not in 20 in that year, but in 2015, not in 21.5. That is a mistake, sorry. But that really we started to develop as of 2018. Then we have 3-4 years of experience with institutional accreditation that in Spain is only for faculties or schools, not for the whole university, not for the whole institution, by the moment, as I trying to explain. How are the characteristics
Университеты целиком. И каковы
also of the this institutional accreditation in Spain? It is a voluntary process. That means that it's not mandatory. Then each university in Spain has its own timing of implementation of internal quality assurance system, and then for deciding now it's ready for institutional accreditation. And the process has been introduced as an additional alternative to the accreditation of official degrees of the study programs. So really is not yet the dominant and the most important evaluation activity in my country. It's born as an alternative because accreditation of each study program is expensive, is hard, employs a lot of time. And then that was the idea. Now we start with institutional accreditation just as an alternative model, but not the new one model of quality assurance in Spain. Institutional accreditation focus on the functioning of an internal quality assurance system, of course, and it comes with a certification that is required for university centers to apply for initial institutional accreditation. Each Spanish agency listed in ECAR has its own institutional evaluation program, but there is, and that's very important, I say that there is some kind of competition in Spain among agencies, but always there is a common base protocol for all Spanish agencies because it's required by law. Then we must discuss all the agencies and decide together and arrive to a common decision about a national based protocol. Of course, after each agency develops its own guidelines and programs. I would say, answering the question of this forum, now institutional accreditation is or must be the most important process for quality assurance in my country. And then we must look at and we must know what is the add value for the universities. So how useful is the institutional accreditation now that we are facing new challenges in the whole higher education at a global level? The new legislation opens some doors about. This new legislation. The new legislation, this new royal decree says that it's possible to jump from a institutional accreditation at university centers level, faculties or schools, to university level. That's very important because that change. That means that institutional accreditation will be the most important tool to give trust from society to the universities. And all the activities from and functions and mission of the university will be considered under this new model of institutional accreditation. Not only study programs, but not only internal quality assurance system, but also research, for instance, for the whole university. And we are now in this, how can I say, interesting point. New legislation arriving, evolution of quality assurance coming from different programs, most of them focus on study programs, and inside the study programs, the most important for the legislator was the ex-ante evaluation, what happens before the study program is implemented. And we are now expecting what will happen in the next 2 or 3 years. I give you this example. These paragraphs are taken from the actual review report by ENQA. As Dr. Kalanová said, no, we have passed now our second evaluation by ENQA, and in the review report said, like other agencies in Spain, ACPUA is now moving away from a centralized and highly regulated program accreditation system to a more autonomous system of institutional accreditation based on program accreditation and certification of implementation of an internal quality assurance system. The ENQA review panel said, put attention to it, no? Develop a new methodology for institutional follow-up accreditation, for the new reaccreditation. Try to be innovative regarding the new developments in Spain. And there is this specific suggestion for further development for ACPUA, but I would say for ACPUA and for any, and it could be also a suggestion for any other Spanish agencies, the panel suggests that ACPUA prioritize the development of a methodology of institutional follow-up accreditation geared towards supporting university centers in quality enhancement.
И фокус заключается в том, что нужно поддерживать университеты в их действиях, которые они предпринимают, которые направлены на повышение качества и таким образом повышение общей пригодности для целей институциональной системы аккредитации. Это, конечно же, для нас большой вызов. И что касается европейского подхода к каких-то комбинированных программ, у нас, как вы знаете, есть альянс образовательных программ, и это является, собственно говоря, будущим европейского образования. Таким образом, нам нужно быть очень внимательными, и потому что нам нужно также учитывать и европейские, общеевропейские программы, которые есть у нас в Европе. И что является, то есть почему мы можем быть немного озабоченными. То есть я вам дам сейчас несколько примеров. Есть какие-то вопросы, которые я хочу с вами обсудить. То, что нам интересно обсудить в Испании.
Как улучшить вот эти практики обучения и оценки студентов? Всегда есть свои сложности. Как оценить инновации в обучении с точки зрения внутреннего обеспечения качества и внешнего? Как создать больше мест для встреч? То есть здесь какие-то микрокомпетенции, микроквалификации, замечать воздействие.
New teaching and learning. How we will evaluate this teaching innovation that is coming? How to create more meeting spaces with external stakeholders, especially because the external stakeholders, they will say to us, no, what about this teaching innovation, and what society requires from us, no, and that we must assume and to do. How to increase the culture of quality within institutions, and here comes my example. How to develop the association between quality and sustainability.
Примеры. И как развивать качество и устойчивость, как развивать эту ассоциацию, то есть связь между качеством.
All they are inside all the new developments for the next year about gender perspective, equality.
Должны учитывать гендерные аспекты в качестве также. И я хочу привести примеры из моего агентства, то есть что мы делаем, стараясь ответить на эти важные вопросы и вызовы. Прежде всего, мы должны обдумать и...
If we must give an answer from quality assurance perspective to this changing world that is coming. In our case, we have reactivated the ACPUA Plus students program. That is not an evaluation program. It's a program, a horizontal, transversal program to foster the participation of students and the communication with the students in our activities. Of course, we have this program ACPUA Plus Society because society, external stakeholders must participate, and we need this to listen their voices.
Голоса внешних заинтересованных сторон, голос общества, когда мы планируем нашу деятельность. И, конечно, интернационализация, то есть усиление международного сотрудничества, также очень важно. И вот в последние годы...
Because the question of excellence, if quality assurance activity must create and recognize the excellence, and not only minimum standards of quality, that's important, and it's complementary, it's not the opposite. ACPUA for equality and diversity. ACPUA for equality and diversity, and all the questions about social inclusion and social dimension of quality. We try to structure these lines in our strategic plan. We have this new line, for instance, development of the social dimension of quality, sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030, the gender perspective, dialogue with the stakeholders. I think that we try to develop strategic lines facing this new challenge. And only as example, that we have no time, sorry, no. We have worked a lot with our, in this question of quality and sustainability with our stakeholders, internal universities, but also external stakeholders in the question of sustainable development goals. A large number of initiatives in the universities of Aragon we have developed and can be grouped into living the sustainable development goals, training in sustainable development goals, and a common commitment from the agency and from the institutions, students, teaching and non-teaching staff, social stakeholders, industry stakeholders with these sustainable goals. Then we could launch last year this program called Alcaeus that I'm finishing my presentation. That is a new program. That is an evaluation program. Now we are really in an evaluation and accreditation program that looks for educational institutions, universities, taking the sustainable development goals as a guideline for their activities and become places where sustainability skills are not only taught, but also practiced. And this program, Alcaeus, is an evaluation program to certify the grade of commitment of the universities with with the Sustainable Development Goals. There is evaluation framework. We started last year. These are the dimensions that you are interested. They are, no, of course, my presentation, and we can send another kind of documentations, the criteria. And I think it's a good example of how we are facing this new challenge today. And as you see, there is not a black and white positive or negative certification, no, but you just certify a level of commitment, this bronze, silver, of gold commitment with the Agenda 2030. Then we have a pilot evaluation that is already ongoing, and now we are finishing. And okay, the metaphor, said Dr. Kalanová, I am finished too. Oliver, no, use the knife at the end, paintings, but here you have a paint, no? This is a very famous painting of Goya, this universal painter from Aragon, and this is the doctor with the students. This is a university in practice. They are in the countryside. The professor, the doctor, is with the students in black, no? And they are, as you see, close to the fire, close to the books. The books are shaken by the breeze, by the wind. They have no dust, are free of dust. They are used, and they are active people in a teaching and learning activity. And this red cloak is the color of the quality. That is a good example of Goya in the times of enlightenment in Europe, or about what is I think quality, a living process. A living process, that means, and I'm finished, Goya said, from my personal point of view, no, I only see illuminated shapes, no, and others that they are not. I only see planes that advance to the front and planes that retreat. I don't see too much detail. I don't see too much procedures. I don't look into that dress button or that seam of the dress of the doctor. I see planes, no, that they are coming. Then our quality activity today, if we want to face this new challenge, must be modern, functional, not very procedimental, not very absorbed by the details, must be innovative and modern, like this abstraction of the picture of Goya. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm finished. Thank you very much for your attention.
Антонио, большое спасибо за интересную презентацию. Вы всегда свои презентации сочетаете с художественными произведениями. Это, думаю, очень интересно и, думаю, впечатляюще. Ну, я думаю, один вопрос, если есть желающие задать, пожалуйста, а так время наше истекло. Я хотела поблагодарить вас, Антонио, от имени всех участников форума, от имени агентства за интересную презентацию. А сейчас, значит, 10 минут перерыв. Значит, в 16:30 начинаем со следующей сессии. Я думаю, не против? Ладно. Спасибо большое. Пожалуйста, Иркар Абылкараевич, ваше слово.
Здравствуйте, Исбасаровна, Жаксыбек Абдрахметович, Шолпан Муртазовна. Сегодня для Казахстана знаковый день. Агентство проводит очень серьезный форум по обеспечению качества в высших учебных заведениях Казахстана. Шолпан Муртазовна достаточно подготовленный ректор, знает вузовские работы изнутри, поэтому такой форум нам нужен. Есть много вопросов, которые надо нам обсудить, выявить наши слабые и сильные места. Вместе принять какие-то решения, предложения. Сейчас с докладом управления качеством в высшем учебном заведении и реагирования на новые реалии агентство по обеспечению качества выступает Аурелия Валейкиенэ. Она здесь присутствует. Она является заместителем директора Литовского агентства внешнего обеспечения качества и Европейской сети информационных центров. Ее областями компетенции являются внешнее обеспечение качества высшего образования, академическое признание и интернационализация. Выступала в качестве эксперта по приглашениям Совета Европы, Всемирного банка, Европейского фонда подготовки кадров, фонда Европа-Азия. Очень компетентный человек, мне кажется. Высокий профессиональный уровень. Для нас всех, я думаю, ее выступление представит большой интерес. По окончании выступления можете задавать ей вопросы. Пожалуйста, Аурелия Валейкиенэ, вам слово. Вы в прошлый раз выступали, я хорошо помню, и этот раз выступаете. Нам приятно вас послушать.
Добрый день, спасибо. Для меня большая честь выступать на вашем форуме, поскольку я не очень уверена в знании терминов на русском языке, поэтому я буду делать доклад на английском, но надеюсь, что вы сумеете перенять все идеи, которые я вам представлю. Мой доклад основан на опыте Литвы, а также на опыте Европы, и я участвую как эксперт в разных рабочих группах, даже как эксперт других организаций, поэтому это будет представление немножко в таком контексте, который шире, чем Литва. Сейчас я перейду на английский язык. I will start my presentation with some introductory observations regarding internal quality assurance and the quality management systems at higher education institutions. And I will be calling all types of institutions, universities, colleges of higher education, technical institutes or arts academies.
Образование, технологические университеты, я буду их называть.
Please understand that this is a generic term, so I have in mind all kinds of institutions in my presentation. Certainly, when talking about the new realities in higher education in the most recent years, one cannot pass the topic of the COVID pandemic and the disruption and the consequences that it caused to higher education in the short term, but also about the implications that it has in the long term. I see on the agenda and already heard that my colleague Antonio mentioned the topic of micro-credentials, and you will have a further presentation tomorrow from a colleague from QAA about micro-credentials. I would also mention these in a wider European context, what it means, what some positive aspects and some negative aspects could be identified regarding them. Then I will talk about the importance of the culture, of cherishing quality culture.
О пестовании культуры качества.
Of leadership are changing in the current world. And I will finish with some strategic considerations for you to take to think about your institution and what you could do or what you wish to do in the future to address the challenges that societies are facing today. So, to start with the internal quality management systems and the functions, it usually is structured in a way that there are two main responsibilities, and that is serving internal audiences and also serving external purposes. But here I broke down the internal aspect into two aspects. And the first of them is really about perhaps more technical issues that need to be taken care of. That is meeting the requirements of the internal procedures and processes, that they are well established, that they are implemented regularly, that there is feedback gathered from students, that there is attestation of teachers, and there is information for the administrative purposes. So this is, so to say, a mundane level, the everyday level that the quality management system is serving. But in addition to this, there is very important strategic aspect to really establish the culture.
Чтобы установить культуру, которая будет охватывать всех членов.
For what bureaucracy can do internally. Without the quality culture, the bureaucracy is just bureaucracy. It is not providing impetus for development. But there should be a consideration of higher goals, and the role of leadership is vital here, and it needs to be done in order to consolidate the organization. Increasingly, higher education institutions are competing among themselves, and there are challenges and expectations coming from the labor market, also external funders, public authorities, all stakeholders. So this strategic development aspect is becoming even more important nowadays. To recall what we see as the developments in higher education, and I have in mind here the last 30 years perhaps, it's that we have now almost a universal agreement in the European higher education area that higher education should be student-centered, that we have moved past from the stage where teachers were just transferring knowledge, what they know about the subject, to students, and this was teacher-centered education. Nowadays, we have students in the focus, and we have new pedagogies that focus on the autonomy of the learner, on their motivation and their needs for deeper understanding, so that we not only touch the surface of the knowledge, but we develop skills that are relevant for those learners in the labor market and that are relevant for their personal development, their professional development. It cannot be possible to transfer what needs to be transferred just during the course of higher educational studies in whatever time is allocated for those studies. We need to enable learning that people would be capable to take care of their own learning needs throughout the life, in the lifelong learning perspective, because everything changes at a very fast pace. And more recently, we see that this change is even accelerating, that new challenges are coming into the arena, and there has to be inventory to deal with those challenges. So only enabling the learner-centeredness, we can achieve this. And more importantly, transferable skills are in the focus of education. Certainly, a doctor needs to be trained properly to be a doctor, and other state-regulated professions have to be quality assured so that they deliver the results. But we also see, in addition to these core professional skills, the importance of soft skills, of working with people, of learning throughout the life, of implementing ethical aspects in the professional practice. So this is really very pertinent. And this is achieved by the process of including students and enabling them to co-create their learning experience. So student-centeredness perhaps is the largest shift that happened. In addition to this, we have the focus on learning outcomes. Really not only the knowledge, but the skills and the ability of learners to apply knowledge and skills in practice, and to be able to demonstrate what they learned in the real life settings. To support the learning outcomes approach, there is a specific design of learning programs. In very many cases, national authorities have developed guidelines how institutions could develop their programs based on generic subject field descriptors or generic descriptors of study cycles. And I mean here the implementation of the national qualifications framework. Another trend that we observe in higher education is, of course, the bigger flexibility. We have more and more students that are studying not only full-time in the regular way, but also choosing their own pace and studying part-time. And we see the increasing shift to provide learning not only in a traditional physical way, or provide purely virtual education in open kind of universities, but we see aspects of both physical and virtual learning being blended. And I would say that this is perhaps a predominant mode. The flexibility is also implemented on the level of the programs. We see that students can follow a traditional pace of the program being delivered, but also to compose their learning experience by selecting certain modules and assembling the program that fits to their needs. Multidisciplinarity perhaps is inevitable nowadays, and it is perhaps blended into very many subjects and disciplines, because none of the disciplines are isolated. They rely for the core competences of other disciplines, and they need to be integrated in order to solve the challenges of today's society. And of course, flexibility is meant in terms of the funding options, as in many cases, there is public funding provided for higher education, but students also input part of their resources into the higher education activities. Lastly, the student body is more increasingly diverse. There are traditional learners that continue into higher education straight from the secondary school, but we also see the trend of adults returning to higher education after some time, or even people changing their pathways, coming into higher education after vocational education and training, or vice versa. Increasingly on the international level, we see higher levels of mobility. Thus, in the same classroom, we would have very often local students, but also international students, as this is supported by mobility programs, by bilateral agreements between universities, and we see the increasing presence of not just one nationality in the classroom, but many people. And this contributes to the increased quality of education, because the quality of discussions is more versatile. And of course, students are following their curricula not only in the local national language, but also in English, Russian, German, French, or other widely spoken languages. And the diversity of students is represented by their social economical background and gender and disability as well. So these are changes that we saw developing in higher education in the last 30 years. But in the last 3 years, we're really dealing with the unprecedented changes that are caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has very wide implications. Centrally, implications are on the pedagogy. And here, this is in the center of my presentation, not by accident, because really nobody could anticipate this breaking down and everybody had to adapt very fast. So at the initial stages, we had crisis management. This was the short-term response. But in the long term, in order for higher education studies to be on the quality level and to be sustainable, there has to be solutions that are based on digital learning construction design. This is a very particular design. This means that programs have to be designed to be delivered online. And there are specific approaches and tools for this. Very often, educationalists would be involved in this, and I mean specialists of didactics, in addition to the professor who is in charge of his or her subject. And in a team, quite often there would be IT people included and administrators that would help to shape the course so that it is really designed to be delivered online. What we also see is the need to use diverse IT tools, starting from the tools that enable online communication to the provision of teaching online. And I mean specific teaching platforms. Very interestingly, talking to our institutions in Lithuania, we saw that there is a surge of problems related to academic fraud and misbehavior. And we must acknowledge this because this is really happening. And thus we also see a relevant international working groups and networks devoting their attention to the ethics in higher education and how we could address those challenges. In order to succeed in this changing environment, there is really need to increase the academic support, because we saw that physical libraries were closed, so resources had to be made available to students to work and learn online. Partially, in some cases, laboratories would also be closed. So how do we make sure that practical skills in specific subjects such as engineering or physics or biology or other disciplines are developed? So I know that, for example, institutions in Lithuania sometimes would be arranging for students to pick up some small laboratory equipment to be able to work at home and make some experiments at home, and then deliver back those resources to the university and submitting their results online. So, of course, this is not the best option because not all of the laboratory equipment could be moved so to say, to houses, but this is to address the challenge and to seek innovative ways to look what can be done in this situation. The need to support students working online is really very pertinent. And even more, academics also expressed the need to receive proper briefing how to deliver their courses online, what pedagogies need to be used, and this mutual support from professor to professor was emphasized by our institutions as a culture supporting each other in this new learning environment. Of course, the need for communication increased, And I mean communication of what do we do, how do we do, from central administration of universities to the departments and faculties, but also from lecturer to student and from student to student. This was happening. This was really taking place. Very interestingly, it looked like the pandemics put limits on our physical travel and interaction. And after initial period of some 1 or 2 months of semi-silence, I felt myself like there was many more possibilities to cooperate internationally. So many webinars, seminars, conferences offered online on free of charge. This was really an increased cooperation that I continue to observe even for today. Of course, not everything nowadays is free of charge, and perhaps this has a good reason. In order to provide quality materials, investment needs to be put into that. On the European level, we saw the initiative of the European universities launched. And in Lithuania, several our universities joined those initiatives, joined those networks, in addition to traditional collaboration that they had with their partners abroad. And I see this really as a very positive development, perhaps speeded up by the pandemic. And lastly, it has to be mentioned that the pandemics certainly had a toll on our health. We worked many more hours, and everybody worked many more hours. Students and teachers, and there were reports that the need for psychological support and counseling was increasing on the part of students, and also that teachers were reporting the burnout, because wishing to support their students, they were working many more hours, and the personal life and their working hours were blending, and this is really a negative aspect that has to be properly taken into account. Now, to talk about the academic ethics, of course, there had to be internal regulations adapted to this, because there were not relevant procedures and descriptions available. So this needed to be done swiftly, and preventive measures needed to be taken, clear guidelines on the principles, how students should behave online, how teachers are behaving online, and what are mutual expectations and obligations. And it has been identified that there are a number of soft instruments that are helping to promote ethical behavior online, such as subscribing to the codes of conduct, of ethical conduct online, and also applying other measures. On the stricter side, control measures needed to be implemented to specifically identify the cases of plagiarism, and for that purpose, our institutions were buying and installing specific software, and also using additional proctoring solutions for online examinations and assignments that students take. This has to be done in a specific context, that in the European Union, we have this general directive for protection of personal information. So solutions have to be carefully thought how this is done. What helps to maintain academic ethics is really taking solutions that put student-centeredness in focus. And what I mean here is the review and update of teaching and examination materials, and also engaging in students in such a way that it is interesting to them, it keeps them busy, and it keeps the education in a fun way, and also providing regular feedback to students, how they are doing in the course. Having more often assignments and more often feedback is a measure that is very applicable in this case. Now, moving to the topic of micro-credentials, the reason why I decided to address them is that there is really an ambivalence regarding micro-credentials. More specifically, in the Rome summit, which was held online, ministers of higher education of 49 countries in the European higher education area noticed that in addition to full degrees, many institutions offer or plan to offer smaller units of learning, which enable learners to develop and update their cultural, professional, and transversal skills and competences at various stages of their life. And therefore, they asked the Bologna Secretariat to explore how and to what extent these smaller, flexible units could be developed, and how micro-credentials could be implemented and recognized by institutions. The European Commission also issued a skills agenda as a response to the COVID situation, where economies are halted, and emphasized the need to upskill and to reskill the labor force. These calls were met not with uniform positivity. The European University Association said that contribution of universities to the lifelong learning goes beyond just micro-credentials and needs to be well recognized. And therefore, they called for the discussion on the lifelong learning in a wider context, rather than just solely focusing on micro-credentials. The German Conference of Rectors, in their decision made in November last year, were even more critical, and they said that universities need to carefully rethink micro-credentials. And they said that they are quite skeptical regarding micro-credentials and see them as a secondary option besides the full degree programs and continuing education courses. And there were articles in peer-reviewed journals and in general media being very critical and saying that micro-credentials are just gig credentials for the gig economy. And what it is meant that micro-credentials contribute to disciplining, so to say, universities in two ways. Firstly, that they build tighter linkages between higher education and the workplace requirements, rather than whole occupations, through ensuring that universities are more responsive to employer demands, and in a competitive market already crowded with other types of providers. And they say that instead of micro-credentials, progressive democratic societies should seek ensure that members of society have access to meaningful qualification, rather to a small thing which is shortly lived and is just targeted for specific purposes. Micro-credentials are defined in various ways. You see on the screen here the definition, which is embedded in the study that was done on European level by the call of European Union. And it emphasized that micro-credentials are a proof of some learning outcomes after a short learning experience. They should be assessed against transparent standards, and they should be proven in a certified document, often dispatched digitally. And there are specific aspects that need to be recorded, such as the holder, the name of the person, the achieved learning outcomes, the assessment methods that were used, also the awarding institution, and where applicable, the level in a certain qualification framework and the credits gained. And it was also emphasized that micro-credentials need to be owned by learner, and that they could be combined into larger credentials, and of course there needs to be quality behind. More specifically for higher education purposes, it's said in another project, the microball project that you see the name here, that in higher education context,
В контексте высшего образования ожидается, что
of course certified by some sort of credentials, some sort of diplomas or certificates, and that they are offered by institutions or recognized by institutions using the Lisbon Recognition Convention where applicable, or using recognition of prior learning, and that micro-credentials are designed to provide the learner with specific knowledge, skills, and competences that respond to a variety of purposes, not just one purpose, but variety of purposes, and have societal orientation, personal pertinence, cultural or labor market needs in hand. And that they should be explicitly defined in terms of what kind of learning outcomes are associated with this credential, on which level of the national or European qualifications framework, that they are expressed in credits, and that they are quality assured. Here you see the map of what was discovered in the study conducted at the end of 2019, where 35 countries in Europe participated, and it was said that there is no uniform thing what is behind the micro-credential. It could be MOOCs, it could be parts of degree programs, very often provided online. It could be some small qualifications easing access to higher education, or some small qualifications awarded after higher education, and that they are supplementary awards, they are digital badges, etc. So you see that there is wide variety. If you are already offering micro-credentials or are thinking of offering micro-credentials to your students, these are the main aspects to have in mind in terms of quality assurance. European standards and guidelines apply to all provision of higher education, be it full program or just a small credential. So quality should be in place. And this award should be appropriately placed on a certain level: bachelor level, master level, PhD level, short cycle level, whatever, and that there should be appropriate documentation. The diploma supplement issued, there should be credits used. These credentials should be visible in your databases, in national databases, and other registers. And if you provide those micro-credentials in a wider cooperation networks, for example, with industry representatives, with vocational education and training providers, civil society organizations, public organizations, whomever this might be, it's your, as university, responsibility to assure quality, because you know how quality of higher education should be assured, and you should guarantee quality of this award. When it comes to external quality assurance of micro-credentials, quality assurance agencies may or may not have a specific mandate to look at these small awards. So therefore, micro-credentials should be included in the regular quality assurance instruments that are applied, be it program evaluation and accreditation or institutional review or whatever is there in place. To summarize regarding micro-credentials, there are certain strengths associated. There is a wide political support, at least in European Union, and promotion of micro-credentials, and a lot of funding, EU funding available for them. There are versatility of what is understood by micro-credentials. So there is room for innovation and flexibility. And of course, the possibility for learners to choose between those micro-credentials, what suits them best, is a plus. Weaknesses associated with micro-credentials is that currently funding is available, but sustainability in the long term is not very resolved. And there is ambivalent nature, as I just presented. Not everybody universally salutes appearance of micro-credentials. The criticism is associated that micro-credentials are very small and focused on particular aspects. And if a learner is just taking these small units, there may not be continuity of learning experience and the coherent degree to be awarded at the end. And that there could be very different teaching and learning methods, and that those qualifications may not stack at the end towards a coherent degree, because stackability is really a hope associated with micro-credentials. But still, there is a lot of potential, because many countries in Europe report that they have discussions on the national level regarding which role micro-credentials could play in their specific context. And of course, micro-credentials are associated as a means to attract more international students, and to provide them digitally is also a possibility and a plus. There are, however, threats associated with micro-credentials, and I have already mentioned that they are in competition with traditional degrees and multiple purposes of higher education. It takes time for institutions and for academics to develop those courses and offer them, and this may distract from your other research and provision of programs that you already have. And they need to be, the micro-credentials need to be seen in the context of the national educational policy and also in the context of the national economy. Now, coming to the last part of my presentation. In Lithuania, we are observing that there is really a trend in the increasing professionalism of leading higher education institutions and leading, in general, public sector organizations. And the change of management style is really from the traditional boss to the leader, and from the just simple organizations where we have co-workers to really effective teams. And what is meant by this is that higher education institutions, of course, need to mind business, but that they are not very traditional organizations. However, effectiveness in terms of usage of funding available for institutions, achieving results that institutions have for themselves, but also achieving results and contributing to the implementation of national strategies is very important. In focus should be the processes and procedures, but they need to be communicated, and the role of the leadership in achieving the coherent work so that everybody contributes to the quality culture and that it is cherished and built. The role of leader is really of utmost importance. And here we mean the authority based not only on the traditional understanding of what the leader is, but really of new understanding of attitudes and working in an engaging environment, in leading the teams, in inspiring the teams, in delegating work, and in supporting your colleagues within higher education institutions, and in some cases even applying such new instruments as coaching. And what we see especially stressed is not only a traditional IQ, but also emotional intelligence, that leaders need to reflect on their leadership styles, that they need to be mindful what kind of atmosphere they are creating in the workplace, how they are motivating themselves to be better leaders, how they are improving their leadership capacity, how they are opening the visions for others. And here I would like to quote Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, who said that true leaders need to listen and to be open, but that they should not let anybody to tell who you are. So you need to be responsive, but you need to know where you are heading your institution. The mission of higher education has to be rethought. And these are really my concluding remarks, to say that traditionally higher education has a lot of gains and importance for students and for the society. On average, across OECD countries, people with higher education earn more in their lifetime compared to those people who only gained secondary education, and the gains are increasing with the increasing level of education from bachelor to master and to the PhD. Also, higher education institutions, by doing research, provide value to the society. They produce stock of knowledge, they train highly skilled people, they contribute to innovation, to innovative services, innovative methodologies, innovative products, and also advanced collaboration. But the third mission of institutions, and here you see in shades of green color, the personal development and the support for citizenship, is increasingly more and more important. And what is meant by this is that really adults with higher education are expected to live longer, to lead healthier lifestyles, and that they participate in society and contribute to democratic societies with civic engagement, with cultural impact, transfer of knowledge, and better economic results. So the question here currently is really to redefine the mission of higher education. Professor Chris Brink, which is Emeritus Professor of Newcastle University, United Kingdom, and he also served in leadership positions in South African Republic and in Australia, has developed this innovative concept of civic university. And in this concept, there are two questions. The first question is for the university to answer, what are we good at? And this certifies the supply side of education. What can we do based and using our academic freedom, using our academic autonomy, what kind of knowledge we can produce and how can we disseminate it and how we improve quality? This approach is heading towards excellence. But Professor Brink is saying that this is not enough today. So the second question he asks is, what are we good for? And this is really to emphasize that higher education needs to answer demands of the society and needs to produce societal impact, to produce social relevance, to take on moral and academic responsibility, and really demonstrate responsibility to the public, how they are handling public funding, how they are handling private investment, which is coming from the industry and international organizations and other funders. And Professor Brink is saying that higher education institutions need to apply multidisciplinary approaches. The research really has to be led not only by curiosity of researchers, but help solve societal problems, on local level, on regional level, and global level. Because we have climate crisis, we have migration crisis, we have disruptive economies, we have wars and other major issues where we need to come together with solutions. So Professor Brink is saying that we need to answer to societal problems, and this would also improve the quality of higher education. And with this, I would leave you to think about what you can do in your institutions and how you could address those challenges and needs. Thank you very much for your attention. And I will stop sharing of my presentation here. Excuse me, I don't hear if there are some questions.
Я задаю вам сам вопрос.
Да, пожалуйста.
Вот в зависимости от цифровой технологии студентов, молодежи, как влияет на уровень самостоятельности, свободы и духовного развития личности? Первый вопрос. Второй вопрос. Ваше видение будущего болонского процесса. И в российских вузах многие есть скептики, что болонский процесс, он нужен вообще или не нужен?
Очень хорошие вопросы, спасибо.
Пожалуйста.
На первый вопрос я отвечу, что были сделаны анализы, и видно, что мы привыкли и имеем хорошие навыки использовать коммуникационные...
Госпожа Аурелия, звук нужно включить.
Выступайте, выступайте.
Слышно ее? Хорошо слышно же?
Да.
Хорошо слышно вас.
Ага.
Хорошо.
Да, то есть у студентов есть хорошие навыки использовать коммуникационные технологии. И они умеют хорошо искать информацию, но с большим трудом представляется работа на определенных технологиях, педагогических технологиях. Я имею в виду такие, как Moodle платформы и другие платформы. То есть сегодня надо как бы представлять студентам дополнительные возможности, развивать их навыки, как работать с такими новыми педагогическими платформами. Это одно. А по поводу болонского процесса, я думаю, что это очень актуальный процесс. И когда был сделан анализ, какая польза из этого процесса, мы видим, что у разных стран есть разные проблемы. Есть национальный контекст, какие задачи мы решаем. Как мы видим, если у нас есть возможность поучиться из опыта других стран, да, обсудить свои проблемы в более широком контексте, то мы получаем не только инспирацию для своей работы, но у нас есть тоже такой реформы, которые не всегда даются очень легко, да, есть и некоторая резистенция, потому что это требует перенастройки и наших взглядов, и работы с другими инструментами, И, то есть ставятся гораздо высшие задачи для нас, то вот такой дух сотрудничества в Болонском процессе, он помогает решать те задачи, которые у нас есть на национальном уровне. Болонский процесс тоже дает то, что мы видим, что Европа как регион повышает свою конкурентоспособность. То есть от координации действий, вот когда министры собираются, и они обсуждают,
Let's say when people from
что ставятся все новые задачи. То есть мы не зациклены на задачах и на проблемах вчерашнего дня, но у нас всегда есть такой outlook, ну, вперед. Это нелегко, это очень требует многое от нас, от систем. Надо как бы привлекать более шире, инструментарий должен быть шире, да? Но это не имеет цель только, ну, как бы высшее образование. Ведь Болонский процесс – это тоже процесс, чтобы высшее образование было адекватно требованиям рынка труда. Да? А мы сейчас, вот, как я и говорила, видим, какие проблемы. Глобальные проблемы, да? И кризис климата, и миграция, и войны, и разные другие процессы, разные напряжения в обществе. И надо эти задачи решать. С высшим образованием связаны очень большие надежды, что высшее образование поможет решить эти проблемы. То я вижу хорошее будущее для Болонского процесса.
Спасибо.
Конечно, надо признать, что были проблемы в прошлом. Мы не достигали всех целей. Но сейчас есть дополнительные инструменты. Министры согласовывали порядок работы, вот как достичь больше эффективности Болонского процесса. То есть я смотрю на это очень позитивно.
Вот этот заключительный час у вас было очень правильно. Болонский процесс должен эффективно работать. Мы в 2004 году приступили, один из первых вузов Казахстана, хартию подписывали, город Болония, да? Но я не вижу со стороны Болонского процесса особых таких усилий, чтобы создавать какие-то условия развития с учетом национальных особенностей каждой страны, правильно же, да? Вот. Эффективные какие-то общие инструменты. Да, общие инструменты не может быть, это понятно, но тем не менее с их стороны нет такие вот масштабные исследования, предложения вот не делаются. Во-вторых, вот я задавал вам вопрос, что насколько цифровые технологии влияют на уровень. Мне кажется, сегодня цифровая технология положительная сторона есть отрицательная сторона. Отрицательная сторона как раз цифровая технология снижает уровень самостоятельности, свободы и духовного развития личности. Потому что вы в своем выступлении затрагивали межличностные отношения. Правильно же? В вашем вузе из многих стран приезжают учиться, допустим. У нас, допустим, 117 договоров 25 странами мира. И все вузы у нас, которые заключены договора, эти договора 100% работают у нас, не просто формально подписанные, тем более топовые университеты. Вот. Поэтому вот, мы в свое время последствия научно-технического прогресса не учли же достаточно, да? Мы какие имеем сейчас отрицательные стороны научно-технического прогресса, да? Есть корабли летают, там спутники летают, там атомные электростанции, это положительная сторона, допустим. А какие отрицательная сторона самой цифровой технологии? Не потеряем ли мы с этим молодое поколение? Есть ли преемственность здесь? за цифрой мы всегда должны видеть человека, не просто цифры, правильно? В этом вопросе тоже это настораживает. Эти проблемы надо... Вы правильно поставили вопрос, когда вас я слушал, вот цифровая технология, межличностные отношения, формирование, развитие, все это, общая культура. Поэтому это соотношение, баланс надо соблюдать, мне кажется. Дальше пойдем. Да, спасибо вам огромное, Аурелия. Второй докладчик у нас Петра Пистор. Работает, значит, она в университете, вы знаете, наверное, здесь написано в программе Мюнхенского университета прикладных наук Германии. Вот. В настоящее время ее деятельность сосредоточена на различных партнерских отношениях, в основном в Африке, в Центральной Азии. Качество одного из таких мероприятий Петра в настоящее время координирует проект в Украине, где я учился, аспирантуру, докторантуру закончил, хорошо знаю Украину, украинскую систему образования, направленную на реализацию учебного курса для университетских администраторов и интернациональное образование. Пожалуйста, вам. Петра.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen first. Hope you can see that. So thank you very much, not only for the invitation to this important forum, but also for having me today. And for the kind introduction, which I only partially listened to because of the translation. I'm not too familiar with the translation aspect here. I was invited to speak about a very concrete issue today, namely the CORE concept for quality enhancement. CORE is the name we call our internal quality assurance system at FH Münster, University of Applied Sciences in Germany. And I will speak about, first of all, who we are, who is active in our internal quality assurance system at FH Münster, because of course the framework conditions of a university shape the form of an internal quality assurance system. Before I speak about the core concept, and I will go into detail on different aspects of our model we have implemented, and I will also speak about some lessons we have learned in roughly 15 years of quality assurance in our
Последние 15 лет посвятили внутреннему качеству контролю в нашем университете. Таким образом, кем мы являемся? Мы представляем город
Fachhochschule, a German University of Applied Sciences. That means that we have an applied character to all of our study programs and also to our research activities, which is a little bit different from bigger research universities in Germany. We are located in the northwestern part of Germany, quite close to the Dutch border, and we have two locations where we provide two main campuses where we provide teaching and research, namely in Münster and in Steinfurt, and also we have some smaller locations. Münster is a beautiful city, I can tell you, where you find a lot of bikes, because Münster is very well known for the fact that everybody seems to own 3 bikes or so. And it is also a city where you find many, many students. In Münster, in the city, we have 10 universities with roughly 60,000 students. And at my university, FH Münster, we care for round about 15,400 now students studying from bachelor's up to PhDs, and who are cared for by roughly 1,200 staff members. We provide our teaching and research activities in 4 main areas. As you can see here, at the moment, we have 11 faculties ranging from the engineering area over the social sciences, over business, and also a small part in the art area. And we also have a so-called Münster Center for Interdisciplinarity, where we provide specific interdisciplinary study programs, like, for example, our teachers' education, which we conduct together in cooperation with our neighboring research university, the big University of Münster. A very important fact about FH Münster is surely that we are quite well known in Germany and also coming up now internationally for our internal quality assurance system, because we have been the first university of applied sciences in 2011 that was awarded the seal for the so-called German system accreditation. You might be familiar with the fact that in Germany, universities have the possibility to get their internal QA system accredited. And if they have received the seal for accreditation for their internal system, they are trusted to be capable of ensuring the high quality of its study programs itself. That means that we do not have to invite an external agency to accredit our study programs, but we do it internally, and we have the right to award this seal, which you can see here from the German Accreditation Council. And in 2017, we have been re-awarded the seal, so we are still in the status of being system accredited. Very importantly are the actors in our internal quality assurance system. As you can see here, our presidential board is very active when it comes to internal quality assurance in our university, especially our president himself and also our vice president for teaching and learning. And concerning the operative activities, the Wandelwerk, our Center for Quality Assurance and Enhancement, is responsible for carrying out all the accreditation processes, carrying out several evaluations and all of that. And we work together in close cooperation with our Department for Academic Affairs. These are the ones who deal more or less with the more formal aspects, credits and student enrollment and all of this, whereas the Wandelwerk is responsible more for the overall picture, structuring the internal quality assurance system and the like. And very importantly, we do our internal quality assurance jointly in active collaboration with our faculties, because we have appointed quality representatives in each of our 11 faculties. These are professors with whom we met at least twice a year and with whom we discuss all kinds of questions concerning our internal quality assurance system. For example, do we have to change this or that survey of our students, or what focal topic do we deal with in our next development cycle and things like this. And the responsibility of these professors in the faculty is not only to multiply the knowledge about internal quality assurance and the processes, but also to conduct the processes.
Качества, но также, собственно говоря, и проводить эти самые процессы, чтобы профессоры также активно участвовали в опросах, и это означает...
Let me speak a little bit more in detail about the Wandelwerk. Wandelwerk, of course, is a German term and translates to something like change machine, because we also, by our internal quality assurance system, want to promote change and improvement, innovation with our system. So under the roof of the Wandelwerk, we have 4 teams, one of which is dealing with higher education didactics, curriculum development, digital learning, and with a big project called Learning Culture 4.0, which is there in order to foster modern learning, digitalization, co-creation with our students in teaching and learning, and it will last for the next 5 years. The second team in our center deals with more formal aspects of quality assurance, for example, process management, document management, and project management. And last but not least, or pre-last but not least, our team evaluation and system accreditation deals with all kinds of surveys, rankings, and of course with the process of accrediting our study programs internally. And last but not least, we also have a branch where we provide training and consultancy for actors in the area of higher education, both nationally as well as internationally. So all these actors are responsible for the implementation of our so-called CORE concept that was developed by my colleague Annika Böntert. And I will speak about that concept in detail now. You might, of course, recognize this PDCA cycle comprising of the phases planning, then doing your work, then checking your work, and acting on the results of your work in order to continuously improve. And what we did in our university, because we thought that it might be helpful to make these phases a little bit more understandable, we created different labels and put them on the PDCA cycle. So by planning, we mean to clarify goals. I will speak about that in a minute. And also to optimize workflows, to optimize processes, so that in the doing phase, everybody can do his or her everyday work in a high quality manner. In the checking phase, we want to reflect on the outcomes of our doing. And importantly, in our acting upon the results of our checking phase, we want to understand our activities to be understood as encouraging improvement. So we do not put any sanctions, but we want to encourage improvement and innovation in our faculties. And I will speak about some aspects of these phases bit by bit now. And we focus on the aspect of teaching and learning here. So we implement this cycle on all levels of teaching and learning, ranging from courses to the whole university. Let me speak about how we clarify goals and what kind of instrument we use for this. You might have heard about an instrument that is called Balanced Scorecard, and that is used mostly in for-profit organizations. And we adapted this instrument and called it Academic Scorecard. And an academic scorecard is an instrument that can help organizations to plan their strategic goals, to break them down into operative objectives, and so on and so forth. It is nothing more than a simple grid. And in our university, not only the presidential board, but also all faculties fill out such a grid in a cycle of 5 years. So we have identified the so-called perspectives, areas of development, education, research, and resources, under which fall finances, human resources, infrastructure, and management. And what the faculties and our presidential boards do every 5 years is to fill in strategic goals in these perspectives, break them down into operative objectives, assign activities that they want to implement in order to reach the operative objectives, and also think of indicators or target figures that can prove that the operative objectives have been reached. And all of this is part of our higher education management plan. And there is an iterative process where faculties and our presidential board discuss about this. This is an extract from our academic scorecard on university level. Let me give you one example. One of our goals in the field of education for the whole university was to ensure that students who are increasingly heterogeneous can have study success throughout their student life cycle. And for the whole university, we have identified 3 operative objectives. We wanted to facilitate entrance and orientation for new students, for non-traditional students, by implementing respective programs. We wanted to offer more flexible study programs, and we wanted to strengthen internationalization in order to welcome more international students as well. The activities we assigned to that were, for example, we wanted to foster special didactic concepts for the first 2 semesters in our study programs. We developed a strategy for digitalization as well as one for diversity management. And we also implemented more part-time study programs in order to allow students with, for example, family obligations to have university education. As for the internationalization, we wanted to foster student
Усиление интернационализации. Мы хотели способствовать мобильности студентов и мобильности персонала, и особенно сейчас, когда не все могут путешествовать, мы специально разработали эти концепции интернационализации на родине. То есть вот так может.
By the faculties. As you can see here, there are no indicators assigned. Sometimes we decide on purpose not to assign indicators to our operative objectives because they are sometimes misleading and difficult to collect, but we think nevertheless that such an academic scorecard can really help to harmonize the strategic planning of the overarching university with the strategic planning of our faculties. So as I said before, the alignment of the university's strategic planning and the strategic planning of the faculties is a very iterative and discourse-oriented process. That means we really speak to each other. After 2.5 years of a 5-year cycle, we meet with the faculties, we speak about how they are going on with their activities. And the benefit really lies in the dialogue about the academic scorecard, not so much in the instrument or indicators as such. As for optimizing processes, which for us belongs still to the planning phase in our PDCA cycle, we have a very potent online process management platform in place, which is called Findus. It is accessible for all members of the university, including students. And at the moment, it comprises roughly 130 workflows, 130 processes of our university. And you will find in the process portal a number of different processes using flowchart diagrams. And to these flowchart diagrams, you find all necessary forms, regulations, manuals, and also contact details of people who can help you if you have a question. And since we have developed it ourselves, it was registered as a trademark in 2011. This is what it looks like. Of course, you do not have to be able to read this, but just to give you an impression, you find the flowchart diagrams and you find all necessary documents directly linked to these flowcharts. This is really helpful for all members of the university and for quality assurance as well. So on university level, we have, for example, implemented processes on how to employ academic staff, how to plan a business trip. For the faculty level, how to conduct an external peer review, for example, or for study programs, how to organize a practical training, how to develop and supervise exam. The same is true for the course and module level. And this is how such a flowchart is coming into our process management portal. So basically everybody, including students of the university, can come up with an idea what kind of process should be modeled in our portal. And our colleagues in our Wandelwerk organize a process team that comprises representatives of all areas involved in a work process or affected by it. And this process team comes together, sits together, and analyzes how is the workflow going on now. And then they define what should be the aim of the process and where can we find optimization potential. And in the end, they model a target process, which then has to be released depending on the level, either by our presidential board or by a dean, if it is a process that is only valid for one faculty. And then it will be published in the portal. All users have access to this, and it provides really a benefit when it comes to making workflows more effective, more efficient, and of course, more transparent, which is a crucial factor as well for quality assurance. And the benefit also here is not the development of thousands of flowcharts and technocratic instrument, but the benefit here is that we bring people together across different organizational units who speak to each other and who work jointly on developing their workflows and to making them better. And we use this, for example, whenever we have to prove our internal quality assurance system towards the German Accreditation Council as well. We then do our everyday work, and we also, of course, evaluate our achievements when we reflect our outcomes. And as all universities all over the world, we have implemented several kinds of evaluations. For example, as for internal evaluations, we have a variety of different surveys amongst students. We ask our first-year students how they feel, how they orient themselves in our university and in academic life in general. We evaluate our courses, we survey and also trace our graduates, and we also have an appeals commission in place where students can go if they have a problem that is not tackled with our general internal evaluations. As for the external evaluations, it is obligatory that we have the external perspective included in our internal quality assurance system for being system accredited. And here our faculties can choose whether they will conduct a peer review in a cycle of 7 years, where they invite external experts for a 2-day visit. And you know all of this, these experts have a look, talk to everybody and write a report. All the faculties can choose whether they implement faculty advisory boards or advisory boards for specific study programs. And these advisory boards are meant to accompany a study program over a longer period of time, and they have to meet once a year. And you can see that we grant our faculties quite a lot of freedom here, and most of them choose the way of implementing advisory boards. And this is really also from my experience, a very good way to include this external perspective, because you can continuously have people on board who know the study program and who therefore can give quite a good advice how to improve, because they have a deeper insight into the study programs. Also obligatory for quality assurance systems that are system accredited are meta evaluations. We do that partially in our annual quality talks, about which I will speak in a minute. And every 2 years, we also conduct a quality management symposium, where we invite external experts to a huge conference where we discuss a focal topic, like, for example, visions and missions for teaching and learning was our first symposium, where we spoke about the question, how can we bring...
На первом симпозиуме мы обсуждали, как мы можем...
study programs. And our ongoing cycle...
аспектах. И далее это программы сотрудничества в обучении. Здесь тоже есть свои сложности в обеспечении качества. И вот на симпозиумах мы обсуждаем. У нас присутствуют эксперты, и не только на конференции, но также и в рамках семинара, где мы можем открыто.
The core of our core concept are the annual quality talks by which we encourage improvement in our faculties. These are the phases or the steps we go in order to implement these annual quality talks, and I will speak briefly about each one of them. First, we conduct all these evaluations. The faculties do them themselves. As you have learned, we have a very decentralized system where the professors who are responsible for quality assurance conduct the evaluations. And then we create an information package in the Wandelwerk, in our internal quality assurance system. And for this, we have a look at our academic scorecard or the academic scorecard of the respective faculty. We have a look at statistics, at the survey results, at formal documents, like for example, examination regulations, module handbooks, in case of cooperative study programs, on the cooperation contracts, and all of this. And we comprise a feasible or a handable, a useful information package. And we do that for each faculty in a cycle of 4 years. And then this information package can help us to get information about the students' satisfaction in a particular faculty. We get to know more about the status of internationalization, for example. We get to know about how this particular faculty ensures the quality of its study programs itself, and so on and so forth. As part of compiling information for our quality talks, we also conduct student interviews where we meet with selected students from a respective faculty. And on the basis of this information package, we ask them about their perspectives, whether they can verify or falsify what we can see from the data. And of course, by such a qualitative tool, we can receive more detailed information. And having together all this information, we prepare the annual quality talk together with our presidential board and our Department for Academic Affairs. That means we sit together, and based on the information package, we derive certain focal topics that we want to discuss with the faculty in a larger talk in order to deduce improvement measures, for example. And now the core of our annual quality talks is the quality talk with the faculty. Here we sit together with the dean and the quality management representatives of a faculty and the study program leads, of course. We oftentimes cluster study programs in a particular faculty. And we sit together with either the president or the vice president for academic affairs. And also we sit there, the Wandelwerk, our internal quality assurance office. And we ask ourselves, of course, on the basis of the information we have received, is there at all anything remarkable? And what does this information package tell us? What do the student feedbacks tell us? And is there any need for action? And then we have 3 stages, what we can discuss or agree on with the faculty. Namely, either our presidential board will give a recommendation. This is really a pure recommendation, meaning the faculty can do it or not. It's just a nice recommendation. It would be a good idea, dear faculty, if you would do that. We can also issue so-called agreements. That means that also the faculty and the presidential board agree that there is a need for improvement for a certain aspect, and then it will be fixed in a contract and the faculty agrees to implement this action. Or In case that the faculty is not of the same opinion as the presidential board, which happens very, very rarely, the presidential board can also issue so-called requirements. This is mostly the case whenever external accreditation requirements are tackled here. So, for example, if module descriptions of a certain study program are not formulated in a student-centered and competence-oriented way, it would be a requirement issued by our presidential board to improve this study program. And by this, we accredit our study programs internally. That does not mean that we have a certain point of time where we give a stamp or a seal to our study programs and say, now this study program is re-accredited. We do that for the first accreditation. Whenever a new study program comes into place, then we issue the seal of the German Accreditation Council. But we do not have a system of, let's say, every 4 years where we issue the seal again. But we assume that whenever a study program is visiting all stages of our internal quality assurance system, we trust that this program is still re-accredited. So it's really a trust-based thing here. And these quality talks with the faculty form the core of our so-called rolling system of program accreditation of our study programs. And here you can see again that dialogue and talking to each other again forms the basis for our QA system. Let me finish my presentation with some lessons learned. We have been conducting quality assurance now since more than 15 years, starting with an ISO certification in one of our faculties. And what we found in general was
И то, что мы выяснили, что в моем университете
there is an external requirement, whether we really need to have, for example, a new process for it, or whether we can draw on things that we have already implemented. We are not shy to discuss with our German Accreditation Council. In fact, we do that in the framework of fora we organize twice a year with all universities who are also system accredited in Germany. And we discuss not only with our colleagues from these universities, but also with the Accreditation Council about the requirements, how to read the requirements and things like that. We share good and not so good practices there. We always keep in touch with all faculties. I have to admit that this becomes more difficult the larger the university is. And we are in a phase of transition, I would say, at the moment, because we are one of the largest universities of applied sciences in Germany with 15,400 students at the moment. But when we keep on growing, this will be more difficult to keep in touch with all faculties all of the time. But we always ask our faculties, does it work? Does it work what you do in terms of quality assurance? Or do you have other recommendations? Because only by staying into contact, by discussing, we can create some kind of ownership process. And the last question is, be realistic. So we always ask ourselves, will we be able to manage our task here? Is there enough resource in place? And if there is not enough resource, we are also not shy to say either we do it rightly and correctly, or we don't do it at all. So you might have seen that we have a very dialogue-based quality assurance system in place. This was just a brief overview of the aspects or the instruments we have implemented. I would have been able to talk about our internal quality assurance system for 2 hours, but I think we can clarify certain questions now. So thank you very much, and your questions and comments are, of course, very welcome.
Спасибо, Петра, очень хорошее содержательное выступление. Вопросы будут? Какие вопросы будут? Спикеру.
Арыстанбаева Светлана Андреевна, я задала вопрос в чате, если можно его прочесть. Он уже переведен.
Yeah. Yeah. I read it in English then. In the process of digitalization and development of mobility, have you come across the reduction of academic hours and as a result with a reduction in the number of instructors or professors? No, I think this is a matter of different national contexts here. So as far as I am informed, if I understand the question correctly, there was in terms of this international mobility and all of this, there were no changes concerning hours. Or could you clarify the question? Is there anything to clarify?
Светлана Андреевна.
Еще есть вопросы?
Так, вот я печатаю или лучше устно задать?
Устно задавайте.
Угу. Речь как раз идет о том, что в казахстанских вузах в ходе цифровизации, в том числе видеоконтента лекций, у нас идет накопление в базе МООК, в особенности по дисциплинам ООД, общеобразовательным дисциплинам. И в результате лекторы, профессура остается без часов, потому что наши видеолекции используются в последующем для того, чтобы мы не читали лекции офлайн либо онлайн. Вот у нас ситуация такая. То есть, я так понимаю, это не международный опыт, а, скажем так, это особенность нашей национальной системы, либо отдельно локальной системы в отдельно взятом вузе.
Пожалуйста, Петра.
We also, no, sorry. Okay, finish. Can I answer?
Да, отвечайте, отвечайте.
Okay. In fact, I think we have provided also by this COVID-19 situation, we have the same situation that there was no change in working hours, for example, with our professors. We have the same situation, although we found that preparing all this online content takes more hours, in fact, than teaching on site. And we also do not have any requests to reduce or to increase the professors' hours depending on
Учением или уменьшением академических часов, и нужно ли нам какой-то дополнительный видеоконтент, потому что мы всегда стараемся взаимодействовать с нашими студентами, даже если это происходит.
No request to change the working hours.
Спасибо большое.
Но я должен сказать, что это и международный опыт, не только казахстанский. Через МООКи, безусловно, количество студентов увеличивается или участников увеличивается. Это в Гарварде были прочитаны такие лекции. И реально и стоимость обучения снижается. Такие есть практика вообще. Это хорошие лекции профессора или отдельного, который по новым направлениям медицины, там, здравоохранения, других, биологии, биотехнологий читают. Студенты больше туда идут по специализациям. Есть такие факторы. Конечно, внутри вуза и сопротивляются, чтобы преподаватели не ушли, стоимость обучения не снизилась. Это естественно. Такое противоречие могут быть. Например, лауреат Нобелевской премии будет читать, приедет в Казахстан. Конечно, все пойдут туда на год, допустим, пример. Правильно? Конечно, они будут записываться все студенты на лекции лауреата Нобелевской премии. Он скажет, лекции мои на год не 50 тысяч или 60 тысяч, как в Гарварде, а 25 тысяч долларов. Конечно, туда будут идти все студенты, тем более это передовое достижение науки в области технологий, биотехнологий. Поэтому такая тенденция есть, это со временем это и может быть.
I have a question. Yeah, and at the same time, I totally think that this emergency situation we had provided by this COVID-19 pandemic is also for interdisciplinary and intercultural international learning when you think about all these COILs, cooperative online international learning formats, because they provide learning chances not only for students, but also for international researchers, of course. That is, I think that is a big chance that lies in it. But of course, there are also drawbacks, of course.
Правильно. Еще какие вопросы? Есть?
Слышно, нет? Добрый день.
Да. Слышно.
Аида Трауский университет, нефть и газа. Petra, I do have one question to you about, you showed us, do you hear me properly?
Если вы хотите, чтобы объясните ваше мнение, да, вам сначала нужно поднять руки.
Okay. You showed us your table about university faculty study program and core. And when you mentioned about a study program, you said about supervised exam. I would like to know what type of form of exam do you use in order to increase quality of the results of the exam as it is?
Улучшить качество результатов.
Of exam do you use these days?
We always try to encourage our professors and other teachers, our lecturers, to come up with exams that are oriented towards the formulated intended learning outcomes of their courses and of their study programs. So we, in our didactic framework, we, for example, provide workshops and stuff, how to formulate intended learning outcomes and how to follow this concept of constructive alignment. Let me give you an example. If you have, if one of your intended learning outcomes is that the student will be able to present research results, then of course the examination process should not be a multiple choice test, but should be an exam where the student can present his or her own results. Just a brief example. So we encourage using this constructive alignment concept to formulate intended learning outcomes first, to come up with a form of assessment and to implement teaching and learning methods that can help the students to pass this exam. This is how we ensure quality of our exams and all the other things that you know as well, that we always have two supervisors and stuff like this in order to ensure that two opinions, two perspectives come together then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Петра, вот такой вопрос. Вот, ну, различные модели развития и управления высшим образованием существуют в мире. Это Юго-Восточная Азия, вот, американская модель, германская модель. Чем отличается вот модель развития высшего образования Германии от Америки?
I do not know much about the whole world, of course, and I do not know much about the United States in particular. I have worked a little bit in Southeast Asia, for example, and also in Central Asia, and my opinion on this is that we have a tendency in Western Europe, for example, to be a little bit more flexible, to be a little bit more trust-based, so to speak. Because we have a tendency to have flatter hierarchies within our institutions. Whereas in other parts of the world, my impression is that depending on the national culture, depending on the organizational culture, there is more steering and management by the help, for example, of key performance indicators, and we have a little bit more flexibility there, I would say. As I said, we deliberately decided not to implement for each of our strategic goals or operative objectives to implement a key performance indicator, because we think they are sometimes misleading. And this is my personal impression, that it depends very much on the national and also on the organizational culture, how you do this management approach.
Да, правильно вы говорите, я согласен с вами. Еще есть вопросы?
У меня еще есть вопрос.
Пожалуйста.
Можно? Анчуков Сергей Васильевич, Российский государственный педагогический университет имени Герцена. Вот, Петра, я слышал, что вы готовите и архитекторов, то есть представителей творческих специальностей, и представителей технических специальностей, по всей видимости, инженеров. Вот при оценке качества работы преподавателей вы делаете различия вот в достижениях этих преподавателей? Ну, я имею в виду, допустим, художники больше отчитываются выставками, каким-то личным творчеством, проектами, а представители, допустим, профессорско-преподавательского состава, которые готовят технический персонал, может быть, это статьи, может быть, какие-то проекты в технической сфере. Вот как вы учитываете вот эту специфику представителей профессорско-преподавательского состава, творческого и вот технического?
Thank you very much for this important question. Indeed, I have to disappoint you because we do not evaluate professors. But I see your point, of course. I know what you are aiming at, that there are different subject cultures in one higher education institution. And what we do in order to foster quality there is to take into consideration these different cultures. And we can achieve that by, for example, drawing on the perspective of external experts, which we choose wisely. That means that whenever there is an external evaluation of the Faculty of Arts, for example, we invite experts from the field of arts. So we draw on the external experience because we ourselves internally as the Wandelwerk, the Internal Quality Assurance Center, we do not claim that we are familiar with all of the different subject cultures. So we try to take into consideration the particularities of our different faculties. And when it comes to evaluations, we also design our instruments accordingly. You mentioned rightly that in our engineering faculty, they deal a lot with, with machines and all of this. Then all of our surveys, for example, are geared towards this kind of teaching and learning. Whereas in the arts faculty, of course, the questions will be different. And we achieve that by staying into contact with our faculty representatives in our faculties, these professors who are responsible for quality assurance, because they will give us the feedback. This is something that fits to our particular subject culture, or this does not fit at all. But we do not evaluate the performance of our professors at all. What we do is that as a University of Applied Sciences, it is obligatory that all of our professors have been working in industry before they can become professor at a university. And what we do with them is that they have a contract for, I think, 2 years, where they start teaching and doing research, and it is obligatory for them to follow certain courses, for example, on modern teaching like digitalization, learning outcome approach, all of this. And after these 2 years, they are evaluated before they will become a full professor at our university. But we do not do regular checkings of their performance. But we do course evaluation. Sorry for adding that. We do, of course, course evaluation. So we evaluate all of our study modules, but these are not necessarily geared towards the performance of the professor, but the aim is to evaluate the whole construct of a good course. And we have a definition of good teaching that is in alignment with a particular subject culture. It does not only aim at the performance of the teacher.
Спасибо.
Хорошо. Правильно сказано. Надо поддержать, надо Петра. Каждый вуз должен иметь свою самостоятельность.
Эркара Балкараевич, время у нас полчаса уже мы вышли.
Ну, завершаем, пожалуйста, как вы скажете. Завершаем.
Петра устала.
Люди уже устали.
Забросали вопросами, конечно, очень интересно.
Каждый день ее не видим. Вот один раз можно забросать вопросами. Чего страшного нет. Для этого пригласили ее. Правильно, Петра?
Yes, you are right. And of course, you are welcome to contact me in case you have further questions later on.
Спасибо. Ну, тогда сегодняшний день завершаем. Моим спикерам большое спасибо. За других спикеров я не отвечаю. Вот. Умные женщины, продвинутые, креативные, знают работу высшей школы, хорошо в своей стране, и международный опыт хорошо изучают. Поэтому сегодняшняя беседа, дискуссия была очень полезна. До свидания. До завтра.
Уважаемые коллеги, разрешите завершить первый день Евразийского форума. Спасибо всем за активное участие. Встречаемся завтра. Эркара Балкараевич, вам большое спасибо за проведение.
До свидания. До свидания.
До свидания.
Жақсы болыңыздар.
Завтра.
До свидания.